Let's go for it. Let's call this meeting to order. 6 o'clock. Time to go. Are y'all with me? Okay, I want to welcome everybody. Have a really full agenda tonight. I have had one request to add a follow-up to the scores presentation mentioned as Dr. Woodard, and we'll have that under instruction as well, just some questions about it. So we start with finance, I think. Or do we have anyone here that we need to go first here? That no? We okay? Okay. Huh? No, he loves us. He'll sit here. He loves to. Huh? Okay, let's then, start with finance. Let me pull up. We've got a bunch of budget amendments. Mr. Laconin, what's up with that? And I mean, I'm sure maybe you all have questions. I'll start it off with a question about the revenue for Kids on Stage. Does that include benefits and everything that comes with? It does, for all of them? Okay. So health insurance would be, that would be a given for whatever, so. Okay, so that budget amendment covers all of those new stipends that are this year?
This is just reclassing that revenue to the correct line item.
Okay.
That budget amendment is for. It's putting the Kids on Stage to the correct line item.
Okay, your mic is not working, I don't know. Okay. All right, any other discussion about budget amendments? Any questions about them?
Testing, 1, 2, 7,
testing or
8, 9. I'm good.
Ms. Park?
I don't know if this is really should be directed at Doug or at Dr. Marzak, but with regards to the Kids on Stage, if we have someone that retires, we pay for their highest 5 years, right, for TCRS, and are we expected to get any money after the fact for people that have retired for these increases in salary?
I would defer to Chris as far as that contract goes.
So the contract that we have with Kids on Stage is while the people are working, they submit money to Maury County Public Schools to incentivize those people for doing additional work outside the normal school day. So no, there is no money for retirement down the road. It's only for the year in which they're working, and that could go away at any time. So as part of the Kids on Stage agreement, 30 days notice, discontinuation, employee leaves the system, or if there's no funding in the Kids on Stage budget, it just goes away.
Understand that, but I guess how did this come about is what I'm kind of curious of, because I know last year we talked about this and it was specific to one particular employee, and now it seems like it's broadened to 4 of the 6 administrators at Mount Pleasant. And, we had discussion about it last year about how we had an administrator's handbook. We have a salary schedule. It was a deviation from the salary schedule. The board kind of raised some concerns. It went through. But now it seems like we've just taken that deviation and multiplied it. Is this something that Kids on Stage came to us and said, hey, this is what we want to do, or is this something that management suggested?
The Kids on Stage board decided to make a changement in their structure about how they were working through Maury County Schools with some of the administrators, and so they proposed it. We agreed to it because there is some work that they'll be doing that will incentivize not only Maury County Schools but also the Mount Pleasant community, and it was within policy and laws. So that's why we decided to go forward with it, from Kids on Stage.
So, you said it is within policy?
Yes.
What about the handbook, the administrator's handbook?
As far as what Murray County Public Schools pays,
Mm-hmm.
we are in compliance with the administrator handbook.
We're in compliance with the administrator handbook even though we're paying something over and above what the handbook says that we're gonna pay?
We're not paying over and above. The school system is not.
Is it not coming through? So is Kids on Stage, are they 1099ing these people for the supplement?
No, Kids on Stage provides a supplement to Murray County Public Schools. We pay the employees, all the applicable taxes and everything are taken out.
So we are paying them over and above what the salary schedule says?
No, I would say we're not. I would say Kids on Stage is supplementing salaries, but we are not.
I guess I just want to say, I don't want to get into an issue of if this is what Kids on Stage wants to do, I have no objection to that. I just want to state that first and foremost. But I do have some concerns about what exactly we're getting for that from the standpoint of, is this something that, it sounds like this is something that Kids on Stage, they wanted to do. But I don't necessarily know what the direct result, what the benefits are for our students. And I say that because I know last year at Mount Pleasant Middle School, they didn't have an Algebra 1 teacher for an entire semester. So if I were going to Kids on Stage and saying, hey, we need some help, I would say, hey, we need a qualified Algebra 1 teacher to be in our classroom every day so that those Algebra 1 scores that we looked at a few months ago, there's a correlation, I think, there. But I don't really see why we're picking and choosing 4 out of 6 administrators and why we want to do that.
I just want to say something to clarify. Kids on Stage has always made the same donation to the schools. It was going to one principal person before, which was Cindy Pride's position, and they were paying her whole salary. So what they've done is just split it up to fund a leadership group. That, as far as I know, if that makes any sense.
That does. I guess I would say though that when we talked last year about one particular administrator getting it, I wasn't necessarily thinking about retirement for that particular administrator. But now that we're talking about 4 out of 6, I don't know what the retirement status of those particular administrators are, but I know it's my understanding that at least one of them has over 25 years in our system, I believe. So retirement is potentially on the horizon. Murray County Public Schools will potentially be responsible for that increased pay that we're not ultimately getting reimbursed for. So that's where I have a little bit of concern about this particular, just the way that this is being done this year. Last year it wasn't, I still thought it was a deviation from the administrator's handbook. I still think that's an issue. Obviously, management does not. I still question whether it's the best use of the money, but I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. I would just hope management would want to see our kids get the benefit, not administrators.
Madam Chair, can I talk?
Dr. Martha.
Sorry, I have neglected to look at you. I'm sorry, my apologies. Out of order.
Her light was still on.
Yes,
so,
ma'am.
there you
Gotcha.
go.
So one of the things that Kids on Stage does is they have attached a scorecarding system to each employee that receives this additional stipend, and there are certain benchmarks that they have to hit, and those benchmarks are in line with what are you doing to increase student outcomes in those schools for kids. So the Kids on Stage board expects a return on the investment. It's not just money just given freely, if you will. There are quarterly check-ins. There's responsibility of reporting back to the Kids on Stage board. So they've attached certain strategies and benchmarks and key metrics that these people have to hit in order for the stipend to continue to go. If you would like me to bring some of those metrics to present to the school board, I'd be happy to give them to you. But they are, the Kids on Stage board, and Ms. Morency, correct me if I'm wrong, is trying to work in a way in order to incentivize people to continue to drive the work of Murray County Schools and Mount Pleasant to continue to create this K through 14 STEAM campus that becomes a national model, and that's what the Kids on Stage board is continuing to try to drive.
I am curious, though, when you talk about benchmarks, are they benchmarks that would not apply to our other, it's over and above what we would expect of our own principals at, say, Spring Hill, Central, any of the other schools?
Yes, ma'am.
So you have different expectations for different principals?
No, ma'am.
That's inconsistent.
I have basic expectations for all principals inside Murray County Schools. If a business wants to work with an individual school or schools to be able to do specific things to drive even further, I'm not turning away businesses from doing that.
I have a question, if you'll give me just a second, Ms. Parker, because I noticed that Mike, is that his name, Mitchell, that he's calls himself on Twitter, the Murray County Schools are something for Murray County Schools. And in his contract that we've seen, it says that we're responsible for all of his benefits. Okay, so I don't remember that position being something we discussed if we're paying for an art director for Murray County Schools. Explain that to me.
Yes, ma'am. So back during the budget season, both Kate Finn and Mike Mitchell that was brought up during the budget season. So what we've done with those two positions is we've created a 5-year plan wherein which this year they are working with numerous Murray County Public Schools, both Kate Finn and Mike Mitchell. We were able to get access to those two people who normally would have been relegated to just Mount Pleasant for $10,000 each person plus benefits. So they're doing MAP sessions, they're working with individual schools. For example, this year a lot of our schools have started to apply for the Tennessee STEM Innovation Network TSIN certification. The gold seal stamp of approval where Governor Lee has put his power behind making sure that schools in the state of Tennessee are TSIN certified. Kate and Mike are helping schools outside of Mount Pleasant become TSIN certified, such as Randolph Howell, McDowell Elementary School, and Cox Middle School. So we get the benefit of their expertise, and it's going to grow over the next couple of years while our investment level as a school district stays exactly the same.
How much? Tell me again, how much are Murray County Schools paying, or how much is Kids on Stage?
For each position, it's $10,000 each.
From Murray County Schools?
From Murray County Schools and the benefits.
And Kids on Stage pays the rest of their salary?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion? Ms. Parker?
Can you provide a copy of the contracts for that? Because I don't see those on there. I'm assuming that's what's associated with the budget amendment.
The budget amendment
Just
is reclassifying the revenue to the correct line item and moving that budget from there to there. So it's really just moving our budget from one line item to the next. It's not specifically saying that this is the contract and we're increasing our expenditures to this because we've already budgeted for it in our expenditures. So the budget's already allocated for the expenditure side. We're just reallocating to make sure the revenue is correct.
The revenue covers it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I was just curious because you mentioned a contract that I don't know that I've ever seen a contract is all I'm saying. And if I missed it, I apologize. I just don't recall seeing that.
I think it was
Mr. Howell?
a meeting or two ago. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember seeing the contract. I didn't study that length, but it was on one of our meeting attachments. Which one, I have no idea.
I do have it. I'll be glad to send it to you, but don't ask me to do it right this minute, okay? But I will send it to you. And my question, because I have seen it, is the other ones were an MOU, just a simple MOU, but they didn't define benefits as being part of, and that was my concern about it, was it didn't say in there that Kids on Stage would provide the benefits. So I asked Doug to provide me an invoice showing that they were billed for benefits, and we discussed that. So in the meantime, I saw the other contract that it stated $10,000, just like he said, but that we would pay the benefit. That was clearly earmarked. Excuse me.
Would the school board like for me to send the most recent invoice that was sent to Kids on Stage that they paid, and it breaks out everything that was paid on there? Now here's the thing: you're going to see a difference because that was last year's contract. Since we have not billed for July 1 through 9/30 yet, so we haven't billed for first quarter yet due to kind of things falling behind. So that we need to bill for the first quarter, and HR was doing this. So I can forward what I sent to Betty after research, and
clearly I am not. I am thrilled to death with what Kids on Stage is providing. Absolutely thrilled. But I did have concerns about the MOU not clearly stating that stipend, and that's what it is. It's like a coaching supplement, a stipend, whatever you want to call it. But that stipend, that their benefits would be covered, and Doug kind of cleared that up to me. And then I said to him, when you bill it out, you better put those on there. So, but that's why I guess I've seen them. I don't know. Any other discussion about budget amendments? All of these. Any other questions about these budget amendments?
I was just going to say,
Yes, go ahead.
I don't have an objection to reclassifying the revenue for this. I don't have any objection, even though I'm asking those questions. But I do think those are questions that we as a board do need to look at. And it goes beyond benefits at this point when we're talking about 4 people as opposed to just 6 people, when we're talking about people that are potentially looking at retirement, because that is potentially a cost that Maury County taxpayers are going to have to absorb for that increase in salary. I mean, if we pay coaching supplements, and that gets included in TCRS calculations and whatnot, but we're paying that. We don't have somebody else that's cutting us a check for coaching supplements. So I think this is a little different, and we need to just know what we're getting ourselves into. And I appreciate what we're doing. I think the cleanest way to do it would honestly be for the supplement to be handled outside of Maury County Public Schools so it doesn't affect retirement, but that's not the decision that was made.
I really think I can't say this, but I know that in years past, anytime anybody, even let's say we wanted to bring in a coach well-known that needed $1 million to bring them in here to coach Spring Hill Raiders, okay? And you've got someone that's got the money to do it. It would still have to be funneled through Maury County Schools. Well, okay, but I'm just saying.
Yes. I understand what I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that it's creating a liability on our balance sheet, essentially, that I don't think this board has to put on their balance sheet. Now, the board can decide that that's a good thing and that this is the benefit, and I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying I think if we really sat down and talked about it, we probably could figure out a way for this not to be a liability on our balance sheet, is all I'm saying.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
Okay. Yeah, and I just want to chime in on that too. I think when this first came up a couple of years ago, it was, I won't say I guess I'm not opposed to the concept, and this gets outside of the budget discussion at this point. So, but I would, as a board, I mean, this is something that has been uncomfortable for me as a board member. Let me put it that way, being that I just don't, all the pieces of it, and it seems like there is, I wouldn't say that there's a problem with it, but there is considerable risk for there being something unseen that come up. And I would like, as a board, that if we could sit down with Dr. Marzak and have a better understanding of how this would play out if we would add more people or what these look like. I think it would give me a comfort level personally to really understand and not just find out again that one year it was one person, the next year it's a couple more people, and I just have no clue what's going on with that. I think there is a lot of risk here. I don't know what those risks are, but that's the ones I worry about, are the ones we don't know, that just something pops up either in an agreement or if we don't have a standardized way of doing this, that a couple of these are different from other ones and we put ourselves at some risk. So that's what I would like to do as a board with you, to sit down and kind of make sure that we all understand where we're at.
Doctor?
Thank you, ma'am. So, you completely understand mitigating the risk. That's one of the reasons why I make sure and send those MOUs or those contracts over to Jake, to say, hey, take a look at this, what do you think? Is this putting us in any kind of problem? And so we've done that in the past. There hasn't been much of an issue moving forward, but we can always have the discussion, not a problem. I mean, this is an organization in the county that wants to work and financially work with the system to create better outcomes for kids. Where can we go wrong with that? So definitely fine having conversations moving forward, but I just want to be careful that we're not potentially telling other investors in the county that your money may not be good with us. So it's always fine having discussion, talking about the best way to mitigate risk moving forward. But just impressed that, much like you saw the Monday memo today, we've got, companies that are starting to incentivize teachers and start to incentivize the community. Want to make sure that we keep that generosity and that innovative spirit moving forward.
I think it's important we have the discussion though, because I think that it's a matter of transparency as to what's going on in our county, and for us to have the answers, whether we're a Columbia board member or Spring Hill, whatever, that it's better that we have this discussion so that it's open.
Yeah, and again, I don't see it as negative at all. I mean, obviously, I see it as a very positive thing for all of the board members to fully understand what the options are on the table, as we are interacting with other businesses in other areas of the county, that we can fully talk about this and say, hey, these are some options that are on the table. I just would like to fully understand it, and I think some of the misunderstanding may go away once we have a good discussion about what this looks like from all facets.
I was just curious, you mentioned, Mr. Wolver, so Mr. Wolver, had you reviewed the contract, the MOUs and all the contracts before they were signed?
Not this year, sir. I have in the past evidently, but not.
Right.
And typically I get sent those when there's a change, but no, I did not this year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's get back to budget amendments. Yes, sir.
Real quick, before we
Turn your mic on. No. No.
Not another one.
Turn mine off.
Fixed it. So, contracts that come through that require disbursement or allocation of funds, I just want to inform everybody that through the Private Act that we need the purchasing agent's signature and the finance director's signature as we go forward. The purchasing agents to show that we have approved a vendor contract or a contribution contract in accordance with the superintendent, and also the finance director saying that there are funds available if we are expending those funds out. Moving forward, those contracts be signed by those parties, so that we're in compliance with the Financial Management Act. Thank you.
How do you all feel? Do you want to, shall we put these on consent? All of these budget amendments? Okay. There's also then to rescind budget amendment 9002. I'm sorry, I don't remember what that is. Okay.
That's dealing with Title 2A funds, and I'm surprised that works. And so we have amendments to update these revised budgets for these federal programs based on the money we are going to receive in. So these are truly updates, and so since we have an amendment that's kind of revising and getting up to speed, we can rescind this budget amendment to make sure we're getting the correct federal revenues and expenditures to match. Yep.
I assume that we'll put that on consent as well. All right, moving on then, instruction. Dr. Woodard, we asked for an update on right sizing. Was it you, Mr. Moore, who requested that? Mr. Howell did. And I think that he's given an attachment. I was really impressed with the work he's done. So talk to us, Dr. Woodard.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Marzak. I will want to ask Mr. Howell to kind of start. He asked for us to be on here, and I kind of wanted to get a feel for where he wanted to go, and I'll just answer any questions. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Howell.
Well, we go through this every year at budget time, and we talk about this. And the previous fall, we've talked about this. So it's that time of the year again where we talk about this. But I think we should really consider what we're going to do going forward so that this year when we go into the budget season, we know what we're doing. We have an adequate staffing ratio that we know this is where we feel comfortable with, and we can say, this is what we want to do. I mean, we know 70% of our budget, I think it's 70%, is manpower. It's 80, okay, see, I was
86%.
86%. So we need to make sure that we're using that 86% efficiently and effectively, because, you know, there may be a incorrect allocation. So along with this, it also has in here principal salaries. Principal salaries are based on how many teachers they supervise. So we can't just go mucking around with one thing without having an adequate discussion about that as well. So I've talked to Woodard a little bit about this, and there's what a rabbit hole you go down when you start talking about principal salaries and how we gauge those. There's different methods. I personally like tying it to students. How many students are there? But then you get into the worry of, well, we rezone stuff, so that kind of affects it as well. So there's different ways. I'll let him talk more of that. He knows more about that than I do. But so there's pros and cons of everything, but we can't look at one without the other. And I'm not saying that we need to lower salaries or anything like that, but we do need to look at principal salaries and how we're going to calculate those going forward. And then we also need to figure out, do we have the right amount of staff, and are we using it effectively?
May I make this comment too? Now, it's my understanding that what you provide is just a working document. We're still in the process of looking at this, and we'll do some tweaking and all, and it's certainly open the conversation. So go ahead.
Yes, that is correct. We've looked at some samples like this before. Many districts, as they're growing, they have a staffing formula that puts a cap on the number of staff that a school can have. That's something that we're going to need here in Murray County as we continue to grow, strictly for budgeting reasons. So when we think about schools, when they do their master schedules, we want to be able to have an idea of what we're going to allocate. So we need to assign a number that we think is reasonable. And this stuff gets real tricky when you start looking at staffing ratios. Sometimes they get confused with teacher-pupil ratios. It's very different. So, for example, if we had School A has an enrollment of 1,000 kids. If the board says that we want the staffing formula to generally be at 20 to 1, okay, then we divide that by the enrollment. That means that school A, builds their master schedule on 50 teachers. They will get a form that comes out of my office that says that you're allocated 50 teaching positions, and then, of course, they could not go over that allotment unless there was an extenuating circumstance or there was more enrollment to support going over that. Then, of course, the principal would apply for an additional teaching position. That way there's a gatekeeper. We can see how many positions above the allotment are being awarded, and we'd have a handle on how many positions are going in and out. Right now, that's just something that we don't have as a district. It's time for us to look at this so that we'll have a better handle on our staffing moving forward as we grow larger as a district. As I've mentioned to you all before, since we don't have a handle on this, over time schools just get large with positions, and this position creates a way for positions to be added and for positions to be deducted when projections come out. Projections are produced by the Office of Student Pupil Services every February. Shortly after the Super Bowl, we produce the projections. But those numbers don't mean anything if we're not going to reduce staff and take positions away from schools that have lower enrollment by projection. So what should happen is that schools that show increased numbers by projection will get awarded additional positions, and schools that show decreased enrollment by projection should lose positions. Those positions would then go back to HR, and then HR will move people around the district based upon certification areas, based upon licensure. Then, of course, our attrition would be the natural cuts that we have every year, and then, of course, we see that the individuals in the district who go out by retirement at the larger salaries are replaced by people coming in as needed at the lower salaries. And by doing that, we'll save a significant amount of revenue over time. Since we don't have a formula in place now, once we start to regulate this, it will hurt a little bit because we're over in some schools. And so once we apply the formula, it's going to hurt a little bit. We'll be taking some positions away, reallocating those positions where they need to go based upon certification areas and licensure. And then after that, year after year, we have a formula in place that's going to work. but it's just a matter of how we want to do it. With what I've given you, you can look at it 3 different ways. Option 1 would be that we just select the staffing formula for the district. That's just one size fit all. Everybody goes to 18 to 1 or 20 to 1, however you want to do it. Option 2 would be to look at school sizes. We have different sizes in our schools. We have some very small schools, and then we have some large schools. And so is it fair maybe to look at an enrollment range? So option 2 gives you the, which is on page 2. Option 2 lets you look at this by an enrollment range. And then when we get to option 3, we look at this by more of a weighted formula. We look at poverty. If we have schools that have poverty that are above 45, in that 45 to 60% range, we want to make sure class sizes are comfortable, because typically what goes along with our higher poverty schools will be lower academic achievement. And so would it be more fair to look at a weighted formula based on poverty? Those schools that typically have higher poverty also have more ELL students additionally as well. So the needs are just going to be greater at our high poverty schools. So those are the 3 areas. What I'd like to do is put a committee together to kind of study this. I'd love to have a couple of board members on that committee, those of you who be interested in serving on this, and really begin to take a deeper dive. I have pulled some studies from other districts across the country. I've looked at Portland, Oregon. I've looked at Miami-Dade County. I've looked at Metro Nashville's model. Ms. Kinzer sent me Knox County last year. So we looked at Knox County has a model that's pretty good. We looked at a district in Illinois. So I'm looking at how different districts are doing this, because this is a common issue as districts go larger. Our state does have a BEP formula. They do, but the formula is very tight. If we were to staff at the BEP formula, it would be very, very tight and uncomfortable. We don't want that either. So we have to find the happy medium. Where do we move the needle is what I need the district to stand behind. In times before when we had this conversation, it was tough, and some of you all were of the opinion that this is a management decision. Well, boy, this is a tough one. This is one that I believe that we need to all have a good handle on and all be able to stand behind, because it's going to be a major change for the school system. This is going to be a major, major change. And so this one's going to take some time. And maybe we don't even get to it this year. I don't know. This is one of those things that's a really, really big systemic change, and that's a hard one. So I just would like to put together a committee to look at it, dive deeper, and really understand what it will take to do this.
I would prefer the board that we just have a work session on this when you're prepared to do it, because there's so many ways to look at it. I mean, even as I was looking at all 3 options, SPED is also part of that as well, special ed, and those kind of classes. And then you've got Title I schools where you have staffing as requirements for that. So it is a very, very difficult. It's programs too. It's talking about the loss of programs as well. So I don't know if 2 board members on a committee is what you need, but maybe just we need to have a work session when you're prepared to have this. And I know that Mr. Moore is wanting to be our liaison with the budget as well, and so that might be another option there to let him look at how it financially impacts the budget, the numbers that we have. And yes, we do have some small schools with very small classes, and we have some big schools with very big classes. I don't think you can do a one-size-fits-all. I don't. But I also don't think it's right to penalize those schools that have those programs that are putting kids in college. So that's where I am with it. Ms. Morency.
I understand that our elementary schools are already working on a formula. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
So this would
be middle and high.
Middle and high school. So
yes,
that
ma'am.
So and that's how many schools?
That will be the 4 middle schools, 5 middle schools. Now we got Battle Creek. Forgot about Battle Creek. 5 middle schools, and it will be the 3 standalone high schools. I would imagine we would look at our 3 unit schools a little differently, because that's 3 schools in one, and those get tricky as well. And Mr. Howell and I have had some interesting conversation about how we look at the unit schools because of the enrollment there.
Is the just a question, the elementary part of the unit schools, are those do they adhere to the same formula as the,
They do.
okay,
In elementary, we have this. It's just in our middle and high schools,
Okay.
and it's because of the range. The state gives you a range of kind of 25 to 35. And so when you have a range and not just a set number like that, it's easier to, over time, get larger.
All right.
So, we want to make sure we know how many
I
kids
just
are in
wanted
seats.
to clarify that.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone, any further discussion about this? Sorry, keep, Mr. Penny.
All right, thank you. So a couple of things on this. I absolutely agree with Ms. Kinzer. I think this just needs to be the entire board address this. I would love to see this happen as soon as possible, personally. I see no reason to drag this out for a year and a half and try to put it into effect sometime in the future. I understand you say it's a big impact, but financially, the whole issue that we're talking about, it's a big impact that we're not doing it. It just means resources are going to other places that, in my opinion, could be better served when it comes to looking at our overall budget. So I've got a million questions on this, and I can hold most of them if we're actually going to have a work session that just deals with this very soon. But, I mean, clearly there's a lot of potential impacts. You know, what happens to salaries when you split a school off, like Battle Creek's just opened up? What happens then to salaries? Are there grandfathering procedures in place? All those things I would like for us to make sure, for principals, yes. But I will say one thing. I know Ms. Kinzer brought this up about, you know, a child that's going to college, and I can appreciate that. But I can also understand that we have to look at the dollar figure to send a child to college. If we're only, if it's costing us $50,000 to send one kid to college, we have to, as a district, I mean, although that is a sad thing to look at and maybe have to cut a program that would impact that one child. But again, as a district, we have to look at the impact across the district. And if we can use those and should be using those resources elsewhere, we have to get kind of the best bang for our buck for that $50,000. It's just a random number. So, I mean, I know that may impact some children, but I think it also, I mean, I like the idea that the principals can take a look at what their bucket that they have to pull from and decide what are the best programs. You know, if I've got to cut something, I've got to decide what's giving my students in my building the best impact. And I think that moves us in a really good direction to make sure that we're not keeping legacy programs that maybe 20 years ago were a really good thing that maybe they're not today, and they're just kind of still there because they've just been there. And it's hard, again, from the administrative side, it's hard to kind of cut those off sometimes. But I think as a district, we've got to make sure that we're using our resources appropriately. So, again, an entire work session on that, I would love it, and I'll probably come up with a million more questions before we get there. So, thank you.
And I would hope we would also include, I do think that Mr. Howe's discussion about principal salaries is something we, that basing it on the number of students rather than staff, because when you get down to right size, and we're not gonna be able to lower a principal's salary just because we're changing anything, that, we can't do that. But we can say from this moment on or this time on that that we would base it on the number of students. I think that's something we need to look at, and that can be part of the discussion, hopefully. Okay, another meeting, yay. Now, under instruction, Mr. Fulbright had a few follow-up questions to Dr. Woodard's presentation. So, Mr. Fulbright?
Thank you. Spent a lot of time a couple of weeks ago talking about 8th grade math. Now that we're a quarter of the way into the year, just tell me what because I'm sure you guys have glanced over, if nothing else, the report cards grades from the first quarter. Where are we? How are we doing? Are we making progress in 8th grade math?
That's a difficult question to answer without having a benchmark assessment. You know, one of the things that I'm a proponent of is having one or two benchmark assessments that we give within the district, probably twice a year. You know, one in November, one in February. You know, as I mentioned in that presentation, we take the test blind. We don't give an assessment to to find out where kids are from the district level to kind of know. And so that's one of the challenges that we have.
Right.
When we lost Power School Assessment, then we lost the ability to do that. And so, you know, it's one of the things that was cut within the budget.
Let me just jump in there, because that was
Sure.
kind of an unfair question. I didn't.
No, that's all right.
Let me add. This is a little bit more tangible. Do we have certified, licensed math teachers in every eighth grade classroom, every math classroom in eighth grade throughout the district?
That's a tricky question. I'm gonna say, that's what should be there. I'm not responsible for the hiring, but, prior to Ms. Alexander leaving, it's my understanding that we did. If we don't, that's something I need to know. And I can work with Mr. Lindsay, who is our new HR, person for that. Now, we do have some vacancies also. Vacancies always hurt us. And, you all have heard me express my angst on teachers moving and transferring within the district to different positions, creating different vacancies. And so that has been something that's been a challenge also, if I'm just being honest. So, yes, we do have some vacancies. As always, people on leave or sick leave or things like that, or maybe people who start early in the year and then go out on leave early. So some of those challenges are things that we face.
Okay, I just got two more questions. I'm
Yes,
not gonna
sir.
grill you anymore.
Yes, sir. Hope I can answer those.
Well, this one, I mean, this hits pretty close to home, and it's not just my family that's had it. I've been approached by 4 or 5 other families that have had this instance. Straight A student in ninth grade, except for math. And that results back to what you were talking about last year's math classes. My daughter's one of them. What is being done to remedy that deficiency that we had last year going forward for those kids? Because right now her GPA is shot because of not having adequate math instruction last year. And one of the other frustrating things along with that, and this was part of the solution, I suppose, we enrolled her in geometry, and she spent 9 weeks taking algebra that she didn't get last year. So what are we doing to get those kids back up to speed? I like the fact that we're taking care of the eighth graders now, but we're going to have a whole grade level that's moving up that was in the category that we're addressing.
I want to make sure I understand the full gamut of your question.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
kind of rambling.
That's all right. What grade was your daughter in last year?
Eighth grade.
She was in eighth grade in algebra, did not go well. Okay. And so you're saying that now she's in geometry, but spent,
They spent 9 weeks doing algebra to
A
catch
review.
up from last
A
year,
catch up,
and
okay.
now my straight A student is straight A's,
Right.
except for the D in math.
Okay. I want to say this very gently and very respectfully, and I mentioned this when we had the data presentation at the board meeting several weeks ago, when you heard me mention this. I want to say this very respectfully. I wish we had a level 5 teacher in every classroom. That's what we aim for. And we provide a lot of time on human capital development. And I showed a graphic up there that showed you the number of level 5 teachers that we have in this district. Based on last year's testing, that number is 33, and we have over 1,000 teachers employed, and 33 of 1,000 are level 5 teachers. That's about 3% of our teaching corps. And so that's a number that we want to increase. And then when you look at the number of teachers that are ones and twos, that's a challenge. And then when we look at the number of 3s, 4s, and 5s collectively, which is where they should be, we show some improvement. But we do have a more than average number of teachers that need to improve. To remedy that, we have some teachers that are on improvement plans. Principals are addressing some of this with performance plans and things of that nature. And we also offer a lot of opportunities for professional development for people to get better. But then you look at the number of individuals that come to these MAP sessions. You know, you would think in the district that if you have 200 plus individuals who were not performing where they should be, those sessions ought to be packed. You know, we're still not seeing the kind of numbers that we want to see. And those are the kinds of hard conversations that I have with our administrators and our principals meeting. As a matter of fact, you know, I mentioned that last Wednesday. We met at Whitthorne last Wednesday with principals. So those are some areas where I'm pushing individuals.
Well, and I appreciate that, and this is something I'm just going to harp on. One thing I want us to always keep in mind, and I know you guys do, but I want to say it out loud. I can have a 3-year improvement plan for myself as a professional, but as I'm improving myself, that's 3 years worth of kids who are suffering. So that's where I'm coming from, that we need to, I like the improvement plans, and I probably need one in my job, but there's things that suffer in the meantime.
Yes, sir.
Back to what Mr. Moore was saying, we got to look where we're spending our money. if we're lacking in algebra, maybe we don't need to be looking at some of these other things we're looking at. My last question, and this is a little bit off topic, you may have to pass this off to somebody. If I wanted to donate a school bus, how would I go about doing that? Just out of curiosity. Doug, what's the process for donating a school bus?
Well, and we've actually, I think we have something like that on the agenda under
I am not donating a school
2.401.
bus, but I would like to know the
Well,
process.
I lit right up, you know. Well, first we would need to allocate, you know, specifically what you wanted that school bus used for, so that we could amend the budget to make sure that we.
Could I write a
exceeded
check and
that.
have you go buy a school bus for me?
Yeah, you can.
That's all I needed to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It'd take a minute, but we'd pull it through a resolution, and we would accept the funds, budget the funds, and expend the funds, and let you know that we did it. It would have to go through the commission as well. Yep.
Dr. Mark, who?
Ms. Parkins first.
Okay, Ms. Park.
I'm just curious, kind of piggybacking on 8th grade, do we have to offer Algebra 1 or Spanish 1 for high school credit?
Have to? No, ma'am.
So I guess the question I have is, if we are offering it for high school credit, do we not want to make sure that we don't have a level 1 or level 2 teacher, that we're giving these kids that are basically advancing a grade, I guess, do we not want to give them the best chance to be successful in that class? And are we making sure that that's occurring in all of our classes that are for high school credit in middle school?
That is what should be occurring. Absolutely, 100%. That's what should be occurring. Like I said, we want a highly effective teacher in every classroom. That's what should be occurring. If there's someone that is not as effective, that's an issue that, you know, that we work with principals on. Principals and administrators and my staff, we work with helping to bring people up. Obviously, we want to coach people up, and if they, for me, it comes back to two things. Either it's will or skill. Either the person has the will to improve and the desire, the hunger to improve and be better, or it's a skill issue. If you don't have the will to improve, then that's the person that we want out of the organization. So if it's a skill issue, we have all types of professional development that we offer and provide to help people improve their craft. But if it's the will, they just don't want to get better, they don't have the will, then that's a person that we need out of the organization.
Well, and let me just say, I'm not trying to pick on any particular teacher or anything like that, but I do think from a management side, it's incumbent upon management. We have a whole bunch of layers here. We have Dr. Marzak, we have you, we have supervisors underneath you, we have principals, we have assistant principals. I'm assuming all of y'all are potentially in one or all of these classes. But I just want to know what's being done to make sure that we have people with the correct endorsements on there. This is an issue that came up, I want to say, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when we knew that we had a teacher that was teaching for high school credit that was teaching on a waiver, that was teaching a high school credit on a waiver in a pretty difficult subject to get teachers, and I respect that. But again, it comes back to, why are we offering the class if we can't provide a teacher that has the skill and the will?
Good point again. Let me answer that. I know what you're referring to. Schools build their master schedules in the spring with the idea that they will find qualified people. And so once the class is already built and kids are already loaded in, and that's why we try to get this hiring done soon. In a situation like I believe what happened, I'm just trying to remember what happened last year. I believe they could not find anyone, so the state issued a waiver to someone for them to teach the course. You know, and it's sad that kids have to keep missing out on what they need because we can't find qualified individuals to be in these classrooms. That's the sad part. It's really about kids. It's sad that kids have to miss out. We have some kids who want to take advanced courses, who really want to progress. And I don't want to see us have to always resort back to just offering the standard curriculum because we can't find the best of the best. And we should have the best of the best. But what I'm saying is in that particular sense, we had to offer it because we'd already built it into the master schedule, and the state issued a waiver. And, you know, That's just what occurred. Was not the best situation, but could not have predicted that. If we could have predicted that, a change would have been made. But we don't want to stop offering Spanish 1 is what I'm getting at.
So follow up on that. The following year,
Okay.
I guess this year or last year, because I think this may have actually happened 2 years ago, did that teacher get off the waiver and get the endorsement that he or she needed for Spanish 1?
I'll be honest, I do not know. I couldn't answer that. I don't know. Yeah,
Again,
I
this
just don't
is,
know.
I
To be
understand.
honest.
Again, this though is where, if that did not occur, then Spanish 1 probably didn't need to be on that master schedule in spring, right? That's where we're getting at, because this is where it flows to that ninth grader that then goes to take Spanish 2 in high school and struggles. Same thing with algebra going into geometry, and we're noticing a pattern here. And when we looked at the data, we knew that we know there's a big issue with middle school. That was one of the focuses that you brought
Correct.
out. And with all due respect, I don't think a cougar camp or tiger camp or an orientation day is going to solve these problems. So it's going to take everybody rolling up their sleeves and looking at these issues that board members, community members have brought out to management, and everybody working together to figure out the best solution. Spending our money efficiently, but also making sure that these kids are not put into a situation where, when they're doing their applications for college, that they all of a sudden have a D for one of their grades when they're straight
Right.
A students otherwise. That's pretty embarrassing, I feel like.
Right. And listen, let me just say this to you up front. I'm all for accountability. I'm all for it. I don't mind being held accountable. I told you all when we met, I think the meeting we had at the retreat 2 years ago, hold me accountable. I want to be held accountable. But we have a very rigorous process called the master schedule review process that we put schools through every May. And we review all of this. Okay, and we look at what courses are going to offer, and we line everything up. The next piece in that course is the hiring piece, who they choose to hire. After we put them through the review, we're not responsible for the hiring side of that, who is hired. That's not my specific role, okay? I want you to hold me accountable, but for my side of it. I don't know necessarily who in all these, who goes in there. Does that make sense? That's where it has to be vetted through our human resources department. If the person's fully licensed, if they have all the credentials and criteria, that's where HR works with our administrators on that side of it. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm
So
not,
if there's a
I'm
person
not,
in a room,
I'm not trying to hold you. I'm not
Right.
trying to hold you accountable. I'm just saying, though, it's kind of like you're telling me, like, this department's not talking to this department, but this department's all underneath these people, So I don't deal with the management side of it. That's not my role. So the issues have been brought forward, and I'm just looking for management to come up with the solution that works. If it's a matter of the curriculum and instructions not talking to the HR department and making sure that all those boxes got checked for the master schedule, that seems like that's a pretty big deficiency that somehow or another somebody needs to figure out a way to fix that. That seems to be what you're saying.
no, I'm saying that the review process would have already occurred, and then the hiring happens. So we would have already gone through
So you washed your hands when you do the master schedule and the hiring, then you don't follow up to make sure that there's a qualified teacher in that classroom that has the proper endorsement to teach the high school class that you're offering in 8th grade?
I'm saying the human resources department, they vet these individuals that are hired.
But I just gave you an example of one where they taught on a waiver, so you're comfortable with them teaching on a waiver.
Never said that.
So you're not comfortable.
Didn't say I was comfortable with them teaching on a
Are
waiver.
you comfortable with them
No, would
teaching
not
on a
be-
waiver?
No, but not. I prefer a certified person in the room. But
Are-
again, we have not, we do a lot of hiring. That's
Right.
hundreds of positions. So no, we don't go back behind the other department and check and see if they were accurate. We have not done that.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess to piggyback on that, and I won't, and I think unfairly you're taking a little bit of this. I think the discussion is a little broader than that, because to get to what Mr. Fulbright was bringing up, I think that I keep going back to the impact of the student, and what you had said earlier about having a level 1 teacher in what is functionally an optional class at the 8th grade level, and I'm just broadening this up to any of those, Spanish or the algebra. And if I go back to our vision and mission, and I look at what's important for the student, I know that, and I guess this is where as a board member, I'm having trouble balancing this, because I know we've talked about wanting to push those students and have those opportunities, and I think having the opportunity is good, but is it really an opportunity when we're kind of setting them up for failure in some aspects, potentially, not always, and I'm not talking about specifics here, I'm saying, so I guess my question as a board member where does somebody decide that? And I don't know if that's you or somebody else, but it seems like somebody should be weighing that at some point against the master schedule. I have trouble understanding that the master schedule is like the end-all, be-all, and if we were to get to for example, get a couple of weeks into the new year and we realize we do not have an 8th grade algebra teacher at all at this school, how that schedule overrides the fact that we're already behind, and then we get behind, maybe we just grab whoever we can get, and they're a level 2 teacher, or they're just not a good teacher, or maybe 3 weeks in we realize they're not. I just have trouble understanding how that's overrides the rest of this, and how it seems like something we should be looking at annually and reviewing on what our opportunities, and honestly, this really ties into the staffing levels at the schools, what I feel like maybe we have some programs that need to be evaluated for appropriateness, and what really are we getting out of them. I think that all ties together personally, so I could see this easily being a kind of part of that full discussion about what that looks like. Because again, I want to make sure I have a feeling over the last few years since I've been on this board that we sometimes do a lot of things, but maybe we don't do them all very well. And it seems like in some instances we should kind of dial back and do a couple of fewer things, but try to do a much better job at those fewer things. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on that, and I struggle with this part of it. And again, I know you're kind of taking the thing, I know this isn't just you. I guess as a board member, I think Ms. Parker's frustration is just, it seems like there's something missing here, whether it's a check and balance on coming back around and looking at this, or who really should be answering those questions about when do we decide that we just need to not have that program.
Thank you. So every year to the state, we have to turn over how many of our teachers are highly qualified. That's a federal government requirement that has to be reported, and the state reports that out. So typically what happens when we have a vacancy, but a principal finds somebody that is really qualified to teach in that area or has a passion in that area, that's where they'll typically ask for a waiver, and then we request a waiver from the state. There's a whole paperwork process that we have to give to the state, and the state eventually does that final call of, yes, this person is qualified, or no, they're not, and then you get a waiver until you pass your praxis level exams, which would then certify you to be able to teach in that. So the Tennessee Department of Education has a checks and balances with regards to waivers. So there could be people that we send off, and the Department of Ed licensing department looks at it and goes, you know what, based on this person's history, based on where they at, based on their experience, we're not going to give this person a waiver. And then we're back to step zero. But kind of leading into what are we doing, so you may have heard me say before, this is a statewide problem. And so this past week, the Department of Education is going to be launching, and Mr. Lindsay and I are going to try to go. The State Department is launching a Grow Your Own program, where school systems are going to be certified to become early program providers, which is like a teacher going through a bachelor's program to be able to become a certified teacher. So we're going to look at people in the community. We're going to look at people that retired people in the retired math fields, maybe former bankers, current educational assistants, and basically have the ability to be able to certify them to be teachers in Maury County schools over a course of time after they take a required number of coursework. So I talked this past week to Lipscomb University, who is being tabbed by the Department of Ed as one of those people to be able to create a modified and accelerated early program provider program. There's multiple school systems that are trying to clamor with MTSU, Trevecca, Belmont, Lipscomb, TSU to be classified as EPP, because we as a state are sorely lacking highly qualified teachers to be in certain areas. One of the statistics that was thrown out a couple weeks ago at a Department of Ed meeting is 10 years ago, universities used to ask freshmen, what path do you think you will go down? And it was about 26% were choosing education. As of last year, that has dropped to 4%. So we're starting to see the beginning problem of an ongoing potential problem with not having enough certified teachers be able to fill the need of a growing population. Not only that, the new human capital director with the Tennessee Department of Education is looking to ease some licensing restrictions on out-of-state educators. For example, I don't know if you saw the news a couple years ago. There was a teacher that had her bachelor's degree from Harvard. I think was a highly qualified teacher in Illinois, but could not teach in Tennessee. And that was all around licensing restriction problems at the state. It was a red tape problem that was created. So he's new. He's trying to remove a lot of that red tape so that we can take out-of-state highly qualified teachers. For example, teachers from Alabama. If you're right there on the fringe and you retire from Alabama, you can pull full retirement and come across the state line and teach and get a full-time salary. So we have the ability to really pull highly qualified, long-time teachers. You know, Ms. Kinzer, if you want to go back in the classroom, you know, we can work to remove some of that red tape to get you back in an art room. But the state, Penny Schwinn, the state is starting to realize we have an oncoming tsunami problem with not having enough qualified people to be able to meet the demands of our growing populations, especially in Middle Tennessee. So we are addressing it. We are working at it. The problem is the tsunami comes faster than government works. So we're working on it and trying to address it as best we can.
Okay, I'm still in the classroom trying to figure that out. But no, thank you. It's a good discussion, and certainly it is concerning, I think, that our math scores are what they are in middle school, and then it's just going to ripple over into high school, and those scores. And we know too that other counties are giving a bonus to math teachers because they can't find them, and that's not an excuse, but that's the reality of it.
Sorry, can I jump in back?
Sure.
I just want to make sure we're still on 3.2.1, right?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
somewhere.
so we are going to have a full work session scheduled coming up on this? Yes?
Yes, when would you like to do it?
Well, we can figure that out. I just want to make
Yeah,
sure
we're
we don't
gonna
leave
move
tonight
on.
without
We're gonna
deciding
move
we're
on.
going to do that.
Right. Next is zoning and facilities. Mr. Perriman.
Yes, ma'am, and forgive me, I'm still riding the high of thinking I was getting a school bus and then crashing and burning just a minute ago. So, before my mic came on, I was up and then I fell flat real fast. So, some good news is that the first thing on the agenda is the Hewlett-Spencer report. We are headed to home. We've rounded third and we're headed to home on the Battle Creek properties, and Mr. Spencer's here tonight to talk to you about that and about the potential savings that we see as we finish up these projects. And then once he's got that, and any questions you have, we have maybe an option for you on those savings, or a couple of options from that point. So I'm going to let him speak to you at this time.
We certainly are rounding third and coming home, as you said. I like to use that. The sports fields, of course, are ongoing. Those are the last things that we're doing at the schools. Everything's up and running, obviously. Of course, globally, the savings were identified at about 1.7, 1.8 million. That went to the ball fields. That's how we're building those now. So I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up, that we were able to find a really good amount of savings within the job. I remember Steve Hewlett standing up here when we presented the GMP, and we didn't have the sports fields in there. You guys remember this. And he said, boy, we're going to work really hard and try to get them. So we're happy for that. But as we are now getting close to closing out the jobs, there will be some additional savings at the very end. And we feel comfortable enough to tell Mr. Perryman and Dave and now the school board that number will probably come in at about $350,000. And this is after everybody's been paid. And the work is done. We'll put a small amount of money into a warranty account. We did this with Stan on Columbia Central High School. In case something happens, we need to come back. We'll have a little bit of money for each school there, but we're anticipating about $350,000. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more, but it's going to be hovering right around that area. So I know there's some things that you guys have talked about possibly doing with those funds, so that's why we really worked hard to try to get our arms wrapped around what that would be. Of course, a job is never over until it's completely over, and there is a few things that we are still working. Small things, we think we have those costs identified, therefore we're able to announce that figure tonight. Happy to answer any questions on those two projects if you have any.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. What a great job you all do. I just want to remind the board, that $350,000 is money when, and you all know this, I'm just reminding you, and I think maybe Mr. Fulbright was on the commission when that note was said that all that money had to be spent at those schools, and any unspent money not spent at those schools would go back to the commission. So just with that in mind, what is your recommendation?
Saying that could go along with the ball fields, and we do not have the funds to do that. We've looked extensively into that. What we have found is that for about $370,000 to about $380,000, we can light the baseball and the softball field. So there's not quite enough money there. We would bring that as our recommendation based on a final number and ask that you pull money from the fund balance to offset that. The thought being, we just had to give fields at Cox Middle School away, and 22 years later, they finally got lights on a football field. We feel like if we walk away from this property and we do not light those two fields that are not currently scheduled to be lit, that we will never come back to them and light them. Or if we do, it will be down the road to where somebody just says, why did we not do that in the past, and the cost will be much greater at that point. That is really the only project that we have an actual cost on. Now, there are other things that we can do, and there are other things that at your direction we can look into. There are many things on that huge property of land that we own up there, even as we move forward thinking that we won't own all of it, that we do know we need to do. But right now, of the things that we've talked about, that we've looked at, that we've had people study, those are the two. The one thing that really jumps out is that we're close to being able to do that. We will not have an opportunity in the future to light a ball field for $20,000 or $30,000 out of our fund balance, and we can knock that out and really kind of push those to a good completed point in the near future.
Just one question I have, since we do happen to have one of the principals here. Is there anything, and that's kind of everybody, that functionally, since we've kind of had the luxury of this isn't closed out and we've already had to open the schools and they're moving along, is there anything where we have seen a deficiency that we should have taken care of that we just missed? I mean, that would be my question before we look at anything else. Okay. So that's just, I just want to make sure if we happen to miss something, whether it be flow of people or things, or just, whoops, we didn't get this, I would make sure we cover those first. No disrespect to Hewlett Spencer for making sure that you guys covered the bases. I just think we have an opportunity to at least ask that question before we move on to what we do with the rest of the money. Thank you.
That would be our recommendation. Obviously, if you decide not to go that route, there are things that we know we need. We did not fence any of that property. And that is a big initiative from the state. If you know, in the last year, you've paid for a lot of that out of safety money. It's not fun, it's not spectacular, but it is something that has to be done at some point. But our recommendation is to let us get this number finalized, know what it is, and then go ahead and agree that we would take whatever money's left that are needed out of fund balance, because we won't light ball fields again for $20,000 or $30,000. It just won't happen. And that's a pretty safe thing to do. If you haven't been up to look at that property lately, those ball fields look pretty cool, and they actually look like ball fields. They're green and got water flowing on them and all kinds of things. So
I would think we'd need a specific number from you, and a recommendation.
We have a specific number that we were talking to Jamie about earlier, that had a number in it that he said, hold on, let's look at that and make a turnaround. We have a number. By the time the board meeting comes around, if you'll give us that, we will have gotten with them, and we will have a specific dollar amount.
Which is in a week.
We will have it by then, because
okay.
We've got to talk to him and make sure he's in agreement with that.
Well, I think we can keep it on new business and have that discussion.
I would ask that we get that in the packet, not like the night of the meeting.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is that all right with everyone? Okay. All right. Okay, excuse me, I didn't see a light.
Other than lighting the ball fields, can you get us a list of things like the fencing and stuff like that, other things that could be used for?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that in the original packet that was sent to the commission, and was that in the original contract?
The ball fields? or?
I know the ball fields were part of it. I mean, it wasn't what was funded, but that was the way it was presented to us, that it was in there, but the funding didn't cover that. But what, the lights on the ball field, that wasn't part of that?
No, and all of that came back into play once they identified that 1.7 million of savings that they had already identified. That's when that scope of work really came back onto the picture.
Well, I just know that at Central, the money that was left over, we gave back to the commission. So I don't want to, I think that's something that we should look at too, as a board. Just saying.
Mr. Beaver?
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Perriman, I don't know if you're the right man to ask this question to, or someone else, but does TSSAA have some kind of requirement about ball fields being fenced?
Mr. Pointer, I don't think they did in the past. As far as, and let me ask that question. Let me ask a clarification. Are you speaking specifically about like
any field?
Like a baseball field needs a fence?
Yeah.
Like the outfield needs a fence around it?
Yeah.
No, and I will tell you that from having coached baseball at Cox Middle School when all we had was a backstop and we used to put cones up for our outfield fence. No, it's not a requirement, but I also know that it took me 2 years to raise the money to build the outfield fence. But no, there is not a requirement that says you're
on any ball field. There's not any requirement on any ball field by TSSAA.
No, because they don't govern the business of the facilities themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't meet the requirements, that will prevent you from doing certain things. So, for example, if Santa Fe School, for example, doesn't have lights, they can't host district tournaments. So there may not be necessarily hard, heavy requirements, but they restrict you from doing certain things or having certain events. So as a district like ours, it is necessary that we have these things in play so that our programs can take full advantage of every opportunity that exists. So whether they may come down and not say, well, we're not going to force you to put an outfield fence in, if you don't put that outfield fence in, they're not going to allow you to do certain things within TSSAA in those requirements, especially in your high school programs.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Mr. Howe?
So, at Battle Creek, we were not able to do a concession stand. That's fine.
No.
But we do have bathroom facilities?
On the playing surface or on the playing field, no, at this time we do not. But we do not we don't at Cox, we don't several places like that. At several places that we have, you have to go in the building. The bathrooms are designed into that concession stand. It's really a concession stand, bathroom type thing. That number came back at around $450,000, which one we thought was pretty high for the type of building that we were building. And two, was nowhere within our scope of work that we could even address. So we didn't even bring that option to you just because we just felt like that one, we think the number's real high for the type of building that it is, but two, it didn't fit, so we didn't bring it.
Thank you.
We'll look at what you have for us at the board meeting. Okay. All right. Moving on then. Next is the train report.
That's just an update to the we've got 4 projects that are finishing up right now, and that's just the timeline to let you know that we are estimated. One of them is completed, and the other 2 we will complete before we hit the winter break. And just giving you an outline of where we are with that work that's been done.
Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. And we are, since it is this month, we're supposed to give you that report. I do want to, can I back up and just point out one thing that was pretty cool? You didn't have a question about it. I'm going to show you. You get this page pretty often from us. It's a one-page report from Train. We found out this last week when we were meeting that we finished out last school year $120,000 roughly above our projected savings. So showing that the work that we've done through train and through the energy savings that we've done through the PACT agreement, we're over $500,000 to the good from where we would have been last year. When we go back and look at our utilities, we finished up, actually went into Skyward and Pool, and on those utilities, we put that much money and rolled back towards the fund balance this year, and it's from that direct work with that train report. That second thing, if you look at it, there's actually an energy report in there that shows you the energy effect that we're having on the earth. There's some pretty cool things, like we saved cars driving 10 million miles by the amount of energy we saved. Just something that maybe is good to show folks. This 101-page report is kind of like a big umbrella report that we are to give to you. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to click over to a PowerPoint in the middle. We're not going to go through the 101 pages.
Good, because I thought there would be a test, and you know.
A lot of it is the EMG report and some different things. There's elements of the Belmont study that are in there just showing you some projections. There's some information from Murray Alliance. We do apologize. If you go back through it, I know you all looked at the one last year so closely that you'll notice the Murray Alliance report is the same one that they gave us last year. We reached out and they told us they were understaffed and they couldn't give us a new one. So for just the sake of consistency, we put that type of information back in there. But what we wanted to focus on in here tonight, and Mr. Hall's going to walk you through this, kind of not overly going through it, and I'm clicking here as I get to the right thing. We're going to walk you through just some things that we did this year with the capital money to show you the money that came from the commission that we've outlined, what it went into with the school district, and let you ask any questions as you move forward. Just trying to show you the good work that is being done. Also, within that document, if you do go through, there is one page that shows summaries of our schools, and it does have current enrollment data and usages. So you can see the numbers, and that information was pulled on October 4th. That was when we were working to complete it, but you will see the percentages of where we are. If you notice specifically in there the schools in the northern half, you will see how the Battle Creek schools impacted capacity, the number of students we have at the other elementary schools, and that's pretty cool. So it's just there for you. And I'm going to get to the right thing here so he can walk through. We will go relatively quickly through here, but if you have any questions, please let us know. And I don't know why it's pulling that way. Mr. Breeden would be really upset with me right now that I'm technologically struggling with him, but I'll walk you through there.
Can you go, okay. This is kind of a summary page of, you'll see that and some of this we've seen before, but projects by location, we've touched about every school this summer. And again, this goes from July 1 last year to September 30th of this year. So there's some things that you may even see some of the pictures and go, well, why do we have pictures of two different paving things? Some was done last summer, some was done this summer. The Battle Creek schools, those numbers are the totals of those schools, and this is monies that we're trying to close out this year. I honestly don't know what the fund balance is, and I don't know where that $670,000 is, and I couldn't get a hold of Stan on his camel today. So, but I think that came from last year. The EESI is the Energy Efficient Schools Initiative. Some of the lighting upgrade we did with converting all the LEDs, schools to the LEDs, and then also one school we put in automation system on our HVAC system. And then the other funds, that $14 million came from the bond from the 2018. And so all of that totaled was $82,638,082. So we've been busy these last couple of summers. And I say summers, but last 2 years, but we try and get so much done in 40 days, and that's all we have in the summer, but we're still working through some of the stuff this year. So if you all have any questions,
And again, this is included in that 101 page, but you can see this is one of the ones that we're probably the most proud of. We just did is the lighting upgrades at Santa Fe. If you had seen the previous picture of that, you'd kind of not be happy. The new flooring and the tables that have gone in. And this just lets you show that of the things that you've approved this last year, every time we've said this is over $10,000, you don't really get an idea of what that looks like. We've laughed about this. The insides of that unit are new. We're not just taking an old picture and showing it to you, 'cause we really felt bad about putting that in there. But, yeah, we used it twice too. But there's a lot of work that we wanna say thank you to, because every time you've said, we approve for you to do this money, we want you to know that it's hard sometimes for you to get out across the county and to see what it's going to do. But there's a lot of things that are going on within these buildings to make older buildings. If you look at that classroom at Santa Fe and look at those windows, that was a wall that had been closed in where they just covered up windows. And so we're really working hard to make these older buildings look new, to do safety upgrades. All of our buildings now have a panic button in the office that the secretary can push. It is a non-silent button. It calls 911 directly and issues a police response. It's a silent button. It's a silent button. Not a non-silent. It's a non-silent button. It's a silent button. There you go. But it calls 911 and it issues an alarm that says come now. No question. So if they push it, and we've had times that they've had to push it. We also struggled through people putting signs up that pointed to it and said, do not push panic button. So we've had times this year where we just had to question what we were doing, but there are lots of things that are given. If you've been to these schools and seen these doors, I know doors sound silly, but if you really go, they really pop now compared to the ones that weighed 7,000 pounds that were on there. We're getting ready to work on this. This is actually on your agenda tonight. We've done the replacement design, and it's on there tonight to replace this on the front of Highland Park. But you can see the painting in the buildings and the things that have gone. And we just wanted to take an opportunity to show you, and if you go through that report, there's a lot of things in there that you won't find very interesting, but there are things in there that let you know that the money the commission has given us, the money that you've been diligent to hold us accountable to approve, it is there. And this was the projects alone for the last summer. This is what the operations team worked through. Primarily, Mr. Hall headed a lot of this, but this was everybody. This was Tommy's team, and this was transportation and safety helped out with a lot of this. And there was just a lot of things that went on. So we want to thank you for that. And that report, we pulled it down to not 101 pages, but it is a full assessment. So if you go through that, and I know you've all read it by now, but if you go through it and you have questions, please reach out to us about any specifics that are in there, and we'll be happy to work through those things with you. So.
And I'd like to make one more comment. I just got information from Scott Slusher, who is part of the EESI, the Energy Efficient Schools Initiative, and he sent me a sheet and this afternoon, so I wasn't able to get it on there, but you'll see on that project list, there's a lot of things that affect our energy and our utilities. Boilers, HVAC units, windows, believe it or not, affect those things. And just as a thumbnail idea, out of 140 districts, this last year we were 30th, and our price per utility, or utility price per square foot was $1.28, and that went down, meaning it improved over last year. So we're still seeing improvements, and so we're, like I said, 30th out of 140 districts. And some of the ones above us were very small districts.
If Mike works here, you know I've said to you more than once how good the schools look, how professional it looks, the paving, the painting, just the little things like the doors and all that. Y'all have done a tremendous job in stretching your money to make it really a difference in those schools. I mean, you know, when kids come the first day and the school looks fresh and new, and it really makes a difference in how your year starts. So I appreciate it for sure, and I know all of this board does as well.
And just to shout out, we talked today, the principals are really giving us a lot of feedback, not only what we're doing, but they're asking for specifics now. And we're to a point where we've not fixed all of the big items, but we fixed enough of the big items that now we can turn our attention to the things that they ask for, that are more aesthetically pleasing and things that they see as needs rather than just the EMG. We're still deep into that EMG report. We still have lots of things that need to be done, but we're able to reach out and really help them on a kind of a local level as we move forward.
Well, we're glad to have you on board, and Dave, we're really glad that you can step in and with your expertise as well. The next thing is the bleacher repair at Spring Hill High School.
And that one paired also with the next one at Mount Pleasant High School are both things that are identified in the EMG report. We've got a piggyback bid out of Williamson County where we can do that work. You've got the cost into both of those, and both of those are just very simply fixing things that we need to address.
Is there any discussion about those? We're talking about the bleacher repair at Spring Hill and at Mount Pleasant, the atrium at Highland Park. Can we put those on consent? No. He wants to put the atrium on new business and the others on consent. Is that acceptable? Okay. Any discussion about it now?
On the atrium piece, I don't know if I just missed that because I went to the restroom, but did we go over that? Oh, just a picture, okay. Any other information on that? Why, I mean, because my gut would be to put that on consent. Would be interested in why it wouldn't be something. I don't mean to call you out on it if you don't.
If, and if Jamie, he may answer this, did we, or did you just have one person look at rebuilding the atrium, or did you get any additional bids, or?
Yeah, this was, we had ESI, or, ESA, do the architecture on it, the design on it, and then we went out and had a contractor look at it, and it originally was gonna come in about $200,000, and one of the builders looked at it, was able to reuse some of the structure that's already there, the aluminum structure, and, get it down to the $100,000 level.
That may not answer your question. You wanted to know, do we have multiple contractors?
Right.
At the bid you're looking at tonight?
Mm-hmm.
And the short answer to that is that we have a smaller contractor in this county that works in this county that's been doing several projects for us, 4 days. Not Bell, and, Holland Construction, with SOS, we've had several different contractors that we use for some of the smaller things that are, too small for Bell, and that's the short answer of it. So, yes, we have had multiple contractors look at doing the different projects, and when we picked who had the best fit, who had the best price, and honestly, we take feedback from your staff, and Dave Hall really knows who he likes to work with, and who are a good fit, and that's who we bring to the table.
Okay. And, I've said this before, and I'll probably continue to say it. On small items, I mean, I understand, Hewlett Spencer, on the bigger items, it's much easier to let them handle, just, kinda let them handle it. It just seems like a small item like this would be easier to, let the scope, it's not a huge scope on it. It's a fairly small project, but still $101,000 seems, I've been out there, I've seen it, I don't know, it seems still fairly high.
We started this same scenario probably 3 years ago, when we started looking at smaller projects, and as the Middle Tennessee construction started ramping up, I had the hardest time getting someone either to call me back or let alone give me a quote. And a real good example is at Santa Fe, when we had the windows, I was using a company to help me do the specifications out of Lawrenceburg, Lawrenceburg, and when it all finally came down to doing a price, we had SOS was gonna go out and use them as a subcontractor, and they said, and these are the guys that helped me write the spec, they said, no, we're not gonna bid on it, and they said, why? It says, we're too busy. And that's the challenge I get on the smaller projects, the $250,000 and below. They don't wanna mobilize for anything less than that. So what we try to do is package with Hewlett Spencer and bundle a lot of this together so it's more attractive for some of these contractors to come to Columbia and to do these.
Okay, thank you.
Next is the athletics facility plans. I think we asked you to, because we had some discussion on our fund balance, and so Chris is here prepared to talk to us about how to spend it.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and school board members. I have provided for you around, I guess everyone should have a copy of the athletic facilities proposal. This was based on my understanding of basically the amount that could potentially be allocated towards this project, and so I utilized that and I kind of backdoored into it. The first page that you have on your sheet is just a reminder. I know things kind of happen, we kind of get busy, but the school board did approve the facility standards that you all approved. So this is just a first page of those standards. There are standards that go along with that, which also were tied into how I did some of the items as far as the facilities are concerned. But just as kind of a reminder of our athletic facility standards and our commitment to that. So on the proposed athletic facility standards, you'll see a proposal 2 and you'll see a proposal 3. Disregard the date. That's based on when we kind of got our wires crossed on the date in September when I was here. But then also you'll see 2 and 3 because a proposal was also brought before the school board back in the earlier part of the year, which was roughly about $1 million. So several proposals have been presented before the school board, and I even presented a proposal which kind of led the conversation around standards back in the earlier part of the year, right around February. So if you look at Proposal 1 is basically providing funding to high schools only. And by doing that, that allows us to have more funding available to tackle more of our needs at our high schools. And our unit schools will be included in that conversation. So basically, E.A. Cox, Battle Creek Middle, Mount Pleasant Middle, and Woodthorne and Spring Hill Middle would not receive any dollars this funding cycle, and then all of the funding will be allocated accordingly to the rest of the schools. As you know, with E.A. Cox, as Mr. Perryman mentioned earlier, we kind of turned those schools over to the city. Personally, I wish we'd have never done that, but that's just a personal thing. Battle Creek was spending $1.7 million at Battle Creek Middle School that we're utilizing as far as those facilities are concerned. Mount Pleasant Middle School, of course, they've done some work on their own. And then, of course, Woodthorne, of course, we will be looking at mainly practice facilities, and then Spring Hill Middle School is another school where we've invested a significant amount of money in, yet we have not maintained those facilities accordingly. And then, of course, Cullioca Unit School, we will provide bleachers for all of the outdoor facilities at Cullioca Unit School. All of those bleachers are out of compliance. The outdoor facilities, and they're all wooden bleachers. So this would meet our standard, and then we would be able to provide those facilities to them, those bleachers to them accordingly. At Hampshire Unit School, that's a unique situation. They only have one outside facility. They do have, of course, basketball in the gymnasium, and there's some work that needs to be done in there. Actually, some work that Mr. Perryman and his team actually addressed here recently. But the outside bleachers we need to address because they are not actually in compliance. And this is a unique relationship between Maury County Public Schools and Maury County Parks and Recreation. So that's a unique relationship, but the outside bleachers for there need to be replaced. Of course, at Santa Fe Unit School, you are all aware of Santa Fe Unit School, the issues and problems that we've had there. You've seen numerous emails. You've seen a lot of correspondence that's happened from there. We would take $80,000 of that plus the $35,000 that's allocated in the EMG money and combine it to utilize it to be able to move the field in a more accessible way, and quite honestly, it makes more sense to do that. I talked to Stan Breeden before he left in his retirement. Mr. Lane and I as well did, and he mentioned he brought up again about the $35,000 and being able to utilize that, so we can leverage those dollars there. will give us about $115,000 to be able to move those facilities. As far as the soccer and rugby practice fields, Columbia Central, of course, we got emails regarding that, regarding not having dressing room facilities. Dr. Marzak was intimately involved in that. We would add those locker room facilities that are located in the back gym, and then we'd also address the practice facility, which is on the back side of the property at Columbia Central High School. Just to bring up, because this has been mentioned, the tennis courts at Columbia Central High School, also had a conversation with Mr. Breeden about this. To kind of put things in perspective, I think it was roughly $80,000 or so that the tennis courts at Mount Pleasant High School were resurfaced at. And so the conversation came up, well, can we do Columbia Central's high schools for roughly about the same? I think Stan and Dave may have had someone come out and assess them. And this kind of goes back to the maintenance piece that's on the first page. $80,000 has now gone to $350,000 because the tennis courts are in that bad of a shape. Now, they were only assessed by one group, but based on that assessment, their recommendation is just pretty much tear them down and build some new ones, which would cost about $350,000. So going from $80,000 to tearing them down to $350,000 is a significant cost, and that kind of goes into perspective with $1.7 million that we have at Battle Creek, as well as the money that we spent in other schools and trying to be able to make sure that we maintain them. Football visitor bleachers and field safety at Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant visitor bleachers are not handicap accessible. Also, they have some issues as far as compliance is concerned with those bleachers when we did the assessment this summer with Mr. Hatfield. And then Spring Hill High School, of course, the baseball bleachers, and then field safety on the football field as well as the softball field. That's option one. And then option two has everything that you have in for the high school, but we've included the middle school. Of course, E.A. Cox is now owned by the city. Battle Creek dollars are allocated for athletic facilities already currently, and then we would move $15,000 to Mount Pleasant Middle School. The community has done an amazing job rallying together on kind of cutting out that soccer field. I was there for their first soccer match, and the community really came out and supported it all the way from, community support to getting the goals there, et cetera. And this, if redone and done properly, could be used by both football and soccer for practice purposes, and then soccer for game purposes. You really couldn't use it for football game purposes. Whitthorne Middle School soccer practice fields, initial stage of, and a lot of these are initial stages of a multi-year project because it's so comprehensive. But softball field, obviously we'll be able to cut out a softball field, and that kind of gets into Title IX. If you ever driven past Whitthorne, you see the baseball field, the practice field that's in front of the school. Spring Hill Middle School, addressing crowning issues of the football field. So there is some crowning issues with the football field and some safety issues as it pertains to that field, basically just over time and just kind of addressing some of the maintenance side of it. And then, of course, the rest of it is very similar to the above. The amounts are just lower. We did not lower the amount for Santa Fe Unit School just because we needed to make sure we maximize as much money to move that softball field to the front half of the school, which they consider the community school. Any questions about anything?
Are you you're giving us two options?
Well, yes, ma'am. I provided two options for discussion purposes.
Okay.
I do have a preference, but I did want to at least provide those options in talking and in thinking and in conversation.
I'd like to know your preference.
I would go with option two. I think we need to maximize the entire school district. Now, if it's a known fact that we're going to have funding come down the pike year after year after year, which I'm hopeful that is the goal based on how we voted on the standards and the first page that I provided for you, then option one will allow us to have more bang for our buck. But to be able to tackle many of these issues across our district, option two, in my opinion, is the best route.
Is there any other discussion? Mr. Fulbright.
Just out of curiosity, looking at Columbia Central High School, for example, what's the difference between a $110,000 rugby practice facility with locker rooms and a $90,000 facility with locker rooms?
Just the less amount of work, the least that you can do on the field. Just less you can stretch the dollar, basically, is what it is.
I guess I'm asking, can you get, I mean, you can't get the same thing for 90,000 as you can 110,000.
Exactly. So the first goal would be to address the locker rooms, and then from the locker rooms, you would take any of the remaining balance of the dollars that are left and address as many of the needs as far as the soccer, rugby practice field. If you can't address them all with the money that you have left available, then you'll come back and address it in following years with additional funding.
Okay, that helps.
And that goes along with all the other projects. I may have should have been more clear about that, but that's just I try to make it simple on the form and not be too cumbersome. Yep.
Maritza?
Are these bleachers at Spring Hill and Mount Pleasant the same ones that we just talked about?
I don't know. I don't have any idea. I wasn't included in that conversation.
No, the ones we talked about are the indoor retractable bleachers,
Okay, and
and
like,
these are the outdoor.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Howe.
You're fine. Question on the rugby soccer field at Central. Did you say that you're going to work on the locker room first or the field first?
Locker rooms.
All right. One question I have about that, and based on what I've heard from those students, they don't use those locker rooms because they don't practice at the school. So if the fields aren't at the school, I don't know that they're going to go to the back gym and get dressed and then leave and go to Cook Soccer Field or go to Murray County Park. So I don't know which comes first, the chicken or the egg, but I kind of feel like in this case the field needs to come first before the locker rooms.
Well, basically in talking to Coach Sidlowski early on, basically they're already in preparation of raising money to build those locker rooms out anyway. So they're raising significant dollars to go towards those locker rooms. And so the conversation that I had with him was basically himself and the rugby coach are already working together to raise money to build in those locker rooms. So, and then part of the other challenge is too, rugby is practicing at Withorn right now currently, and the girls soccer team and boys soccer team, they're not going to Cook Soccer Park. They're currently still using Murray County Park. But the issue was about them having a dedicated space to change and have a locker room. That was the issue number one. And so I think we can address that at a minimal cost based on the scope of work that we're looking at and still have the money necessary to do the grade work, et cetera. We won't be able to do everything, like put up fencing to keep balls from rolling down, but we will be able to make it a lot more safer and easier for them to practice on that lot behind the practice football field. And so I think we'll be able to achieve in doing both of those.
So going forward, I know that this is year one. When you say an initial stage of a multi-year project, can you kind of detail what will be completed this year and how long the multi-year project you're anticipating on some of these will be?
So I can go down the list. So the football practice field at football multi-purpose field, which is also the soccer at Mount Pleasant, 15,000 is not going to be able to fully turn it into the full-fledged soccer multi-purpose football field that we need it to be. So, for example, in the future, the goal and hope will be to be able to turn it into a full athletic complex for both soccer and football. And those, you're going to need far more than 15,000, which also includes purchases of bleachers, which also includes possible restroom facilities, which also includes multiple things, fencing around the field for safety. Although that may not be a requirement, you definitely don't want anybody to be able to access the field. And right now, the way the field sits is wide open. The grade work on the field as far as that's necessary and needed, we'll be able to get a lot of it done, but not all of it done. And it's also, unfortunately, it's kind of in a flood area, part of it. So the field needs to be adjusted and moved back deeper. And basically, these were parents who jumped on to try to do this work. So that work will need to be done as well within this 15. So it's a multi-stage process, which a greater team of professionals need to be able to look at to be able to determine it. But I just know the 15 will only go a short way, just to be able to fill in the grade work and the divots and the holes based on some of the assessments that I've done. Softball practice field at Withorn is a very similar situation. That old backstop that's behind Withorn, those backstops need to be removed and taken out. but the money that's allocated with the 20 will only be able to go towards, grading the infield for softball and taking that out. So that 20,000, put it in field dirt, put it in topsoil, all of that stuff, and then put in the mule mix and all of the other stuff that goes on top for softball fields, that'll be covered within the 20. We may come in a little under that, but we're not going to be able to take out backstops, replace them, put fencing up around it, kind of draw some divisions. That stuff won't be able to be done with that. That's going to take more time. Spring Hill football field is 15,000, address the crowding issues. With 15,000, basically you're only going to be able to do top dressing of the field, which is really sanding, plugging holes, running it, top dressing it. Really, a crown needs to be reestablished on that field because it pools water. But again, it kind of goes back to, we built these fields and then we didn't have the maintenance piece in place for it. So that's an ongoing project. Culleoka, bleachers. And I shouldn't, 2 years a little, that's a stretch, but basically with Culleoka, when we jumped from the first year to the second year, we lost some bleachers because of the cost. Just based on me doing some preliminary, getting quotes out there, we lose a bleacher based on our specs and services, so we won't be able to get all of them in the first year to fill out all of our facilities. And really, I moved that to soccer, because basically with soccer, they're currently bringing chairs and things for the games now, so we will have one set of bleachers. We just won't have home and visitor bleachers, and that's kind of where that's a multi-year project. Relocation, softball field, I think I feel comfortable in doing that. Nothing there for Central, nothing there for Mount Pleasant, and nothing there for Spring Hill. I will say that every school has multiple multi-year projects, and I did present that back in February or so. That is the thing that kind of sparked the standards. But I will say that the same formula that I used to build this is the same formula I used back in February. I just know it was sticker shock for everybody, but there was a lot of time and precision and energy that went into kind of putting that out over a 3-year time span. So, if that answers your question.
That does, but I guess 2 other questions. One, if you're going to get $500,000 for the next 3 years, are you going to be able to address some bigger projects? Because to me, it looks like we're doing a lot of maintenance and trying to do bleachers and capital. I guess though, when you get $500,000 though, I'm thinking like, for example, like Santa Fe. If it costs $300,000 to move their field, is it beneficial to do half the job and then have to redo half the job the next year when you're trying to finish it out? I don't want us to be paying for stuff twice. If we need to finish something, I want to know that we're spending this wisely. So
no, absolutely. And basically, I think what our determining factor is based on the budget will be based on projects that are brought forth, right? And so then those projects are then put on a priority list, right? So for example, going forward, if we say, all right, we're going to look to allocate in the capital budget $500,000 a year. So all the projects that are currently in the pipeline that are just kind of sitting on my desk, waiting on and hopefully wishing that they come to light, then those are already predetermined and prioritized out accordingly. With this particular funding, it was looking to try to address all the schools and get as many things as we could address as possible within the $500,000. But if knowing money is going to come down the pipeline year to year to year over time, we can strategically map out our plan and how we're going to currently address these, right? So basically, with this was kind of like, we got $500,000, how do we want to look at it and address it? Knowing that we have so many needs that we need to address in the district and so many things that need to be done. So this was a way that we could maximize $500,000 across the district at every school, and then going forward, everything from there would be prioritized. And then every school, every principal at every school, every athletic director, every coach will know how they fall on that prioritized list.
Well, and I guess that's kind of what I'm wondering is, are we going to have a chance to look at that in conjunction with this? Because, for example, if it's going to cost $300,000 to get Central tennis courts, I don't know where that falls on your priority list right now. But I also know that if we do $300,000 for tennis courts, there's not a lot of money to go around for all the other existing needs. So how long is it going to take us to catch up to where we can spend the money that we need to on things that we need to spend it on if we're going to have those sports, or are we going to look at what we do about those sports? Because I still feel like there's transportation issues, particularly that go into play with, I know at Whitthorne and at Central, and those are two big concerns for me that I've heard from parents and from a safety standpoint that I feel like we got to address.
For me, like, I think we need to try to separate the maintenance side and the facility side.
But you didn't do that here.
No, these are actually safety needs. So if I'm looking at the safety issues at Mount Pleasant with the soccer field, that is a safety issue that we're trying to address with really resurfacing and rehabbing that field. So, because basically what happened was the parents came in, they went in there, they cut the field out, they put the goals up, they did all of that, and then the first game, they got cones turned upside down, right? Because where there are holes at on the field, so that no kid runs into the hole. When you have a crowning issue on a football field, that means that the cushion and the padding of the field is not currently there because the sand, dirt, grass balance is not adequate, right? So you need to also crown it so the water runs off. So I made sure that these were not maintenance issues, that these were actually need-based issues to address these facilities. So I was very careful of that, and I also tried to make sure I put that in the document, that it was need-based. But going forward, we got to make sure that we address it from the maintenance side, which is a totally different area, right? And so by addressing the maintenance and by putting that in the budget, that offsets some of the costs that some of the schools may have to pay for certain things, which covers transportation, which covers a lot of other those particular areas that they now have funding for to be able to do. And I have a laundry list of things that from a district level, if we're able to cover, right, also helps address some of those needs going forward. But then as it pertains to the facility side and those capital dollars, yes, I'm more than happy to bring them before the board to be able to look at prior to whatever we're spending, and then show you the prioritized list and the direction that we're heading. Because there are some significant needs, right, as a district. Like when we were at, I guess we were at Central High School, I guess it was, you know, some of the conversation was around a track, right? We do not have track facilities in any of our schools except for Spring Hill Middle School. And we need one at the high school, Spring Hill High School. We need one at Central. We also need one in Mount Pleasant. It taps every area of our community. And those tracks need to also be open to the community to be able to walk. You know, the tennis courts that got fixed in Mount Pleasant, right? Community folks walk up, they use the tennis courts, they play on them. They walk up to Columbia Central High School, they see trees growing up in the middle, and they get in their car and they turn around and go back, right? And so when you are able to get community into your facilities, right, they also begin to take more ownership of your facilities as well. So things that go wrong, they're bigger advocates, and they challenge us really to kind of take care of a lot of those things. So yes, hopefully that answers all your questions. But to the latter point of the facilities, we will bring that prioritized list forward so everybody can review and look at, and then we'll all be on the same page as far as what we need to address and tackle moving forward.
And I just want to make clear, you said that you supported option 2.
Yes,
so
option 2.
The one at the top, not the one at the bottom?
I'm sorry. The second option, which is option 3.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I misspoke.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to catch up. So the bottom one on this one sheet, I only have, we got options 1, 2, and 3. I got 2 options here, so.
Option 3, and then there was the first option was presented back when there was $1 million option
Okay,
back.
but I'm only talking about, just this one.
Yeah, option
Okay.
2, it says it on the sheet at the bottom, yeah.
It says option 2 on there.
Option 3, I'm sorry. I keep getting confused. Option 3. It's the second one on the sheet, option 3. I'm
Okay.
getting my own
So, and then just to clarify too, because again on here it says the soccer rugby practice field, and then any surplus goes to locker rooms. You're saying it is reverse of that?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So I guess as a board, I want to back up a few steps behind this, because I guess this gets back to where and when we initially talked about it, I think the board kind of wanted to go the direction we went with when Stan was able to put together kind of our master thing and kind of get our hands off of. I personally don't want to get into on a like, as we have dollars to be picking and choosing these. Just to say, I think you have done probably as fair a job as you can do on kind of spreading these dollars out, and I do appreciate that. I think that's I think probably for year one is in my opinion a wise model. I think moving ahead, I think I would probably go a little different direction, look at maybe tackling the bigger ones that, because I agree, I worry we we're trying to buy a piece of it. But I think for year one, this is probably appropriate. But again, as a board, what I would ask is, are we looking to approve this as a board, or are we looking to say that we approve the $500,000 and step back and let the department give us kind of what they want to do and kind of go with it? I mean, I'd be asking my fellow board members that.
I think we asked him to do this.
Okay.
That's what we did. At first we were gonna give $500,000, and then we said, we wanna know what the bang for our buck
Sure.
was, and then we asked him to come back at the work session. Mr. Howell?
Well,
Okay, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
So I guess to go along with what Ms. Parker was saying, and I think I like this, I would like to start to build that longer-term, multi-year picture so that I have a comfort level that I can just say, hey, Mr. Pointer, run with this. We're going to try to secure funding as a board, and we're going to try to budget for it, and feel confident that you're appropriately applying that with checkups and with, again, the annual list. That's where I would like to go, and I think that's what we as a board kind of talked about. So to go to that point, I would like to start seeing it come, maybe see that bigger picture that you've got in front of you, that you've got on your desk, that you're moving the pieces around and trying to put it together for us. And I do agree, separating the maintenance, the long-term, the actual maintenance piece from the safety and the upgrade piece, where possible, and start to let us have that comfort level that we can just secure the funding and move ahead with it.
Yes, sir, I'll provide that, yes.
So that's exactly right. I mean, we have to. This is a capital improvement plan. So what I like to see, what I foresee, is we approve $500,000 for this plan. He chooses whichever one. I mean, he's done his homework. He knows what he's doing. That's put in the capital account. We designate that fund for that. So if he comes in and he spends $496,000, then that $4,000 is there for next year. If we are able to approve another $500,000 next year or more or whatever, then he's got $504,000 next year. So that way it's rolling, so that when those, maybe one day we can start tackling the larger, even though we're only allocating a tiny piece of the budget, that one day those tiny little pennies, so to speak, will add up to where we can actually get more bang for the buck, and it's all out there. Furthermore, we do have to do a better job at asking for a maintenance piece. We've got to go out here to these facilities. There are obviously we're not going to hire, somebody and figure out where, does this maintenance guy go to him or him for the fields? How much, there are companies out there that we can contract with to take care of our fields just for the athletic part. And I think that's something that a lot of other school districts do, and we just haven't. We're reaching that point to where we can't rely on parents anymore to do things, and we shouldn't. And that's just part of it, so.
Dr. Marzak? Oh, okay.
Tommy.
It was on a while ago. Who asked? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Dudley, I apologize.
Thank you. Well, first off, I do feel like we've got some communities that have gone over and above in trying to bear some of the cost for the improvements and the facilities in their communities. And I just wish that they would all do that. I think we got some that want to sit back on their lazy behinds and let somebody else give them the world on a gold platter. But I feel like we're still giving to the school systems or the schools. A lot of it is still going to the ones that have already been given so many programs over the years, and we got some schools that are still sitting there without very little. I think we have to try and come up with a way of equalizing the sports programs at all of our schools, and not just giving the big schools everything they want. We've still got some schools that are far behind, and our unit schools are far behind in what they're able to offer. I mean, which comes first, the redoing the crown on a football field versus providing a football field for the schools that don't have or aren't able to offer football, period.
You know, some of the recruiting, I think, the schools haven't tried to maintain, and so I've got some concerns about that.
The adding of the football is you know, we can have that conversation, but I think that's a different conversation altogether. But one of the things in looking at this, and you're absolutely right, at some of our unit schools, the cost is so great that it would not fit in this 500,000. So let's take Culleoka, for example, right? Culleoka is not ADA compliant as it pertains to their parking, right? So we'd have to pave that entire area, which would eat up the 500,000 and then some. The bathroom facilities are not ADA compliant, which would eat up the 500,000 and then some. And so again, it was trying to work in the parameters of the $500,000 to try to stretch and maximize where we saw needs and we could put money and address immediately.
Well, I'm not saying Culleoka, you used it. I'm not saying that we need to provide Culleoka with football, but we haven't spent a whole lot of money on Culleoka's basketball program either. So I mean, there's different ways of coming up with fairness, and it doesn't say that every one of them has to have the exact programs, but we can spend that money to make sure that since Culleoka doesn't have a football program and a track program and some of these other sports, that we do take care of the sports that they do have.
And I'm glad you said that, because that points right back to why we created the standards that was pushed by the school board. And so that was provided for you, but this is just the first page of the standards. I didn't print it all out, but the standards hit at that. It hits at making sure that all of our fields, all of our facilities, everything is at a minimal standard that was approved and set forth by the board. So that answers and addresses your question. But in doing so, it's going to cost. Just go put, you know, it's going to cost us to be able to make those things happen. But that will be tied into the plan as well.
Okay, I didn't see a light. Excuse me, Ms. Parker.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I think that what you've done is admirable for where we're at right now. But I think the reality is, and I think we're trying to address a lot with a little bit of money. The reality, I think, is that we could spend $500,000 at each of our schools easily. And so what I'm just trying to prepare the board for is at some point, we may get to a point where, you know, next year we do Culleoka, the next year we do Spring Hill, the next year, you know, and it may not get spread out to where it goes to 6, 7, 8 schools like it is this year. So I just want us to have that in the back of our mind too. I think it's good to try to address what we can this year, and I think you've done an admirable job of that, but I just want the board to understand that if we're really going to go by this, it's going to take a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of money and time at each of our schools. And so that's one of the reasons why I ask about the multi-phase stuff, is because I don't want to get us in a situation where we're starting something and then we get into the same situation where we hear about Spring Hill Middle that we didn't really maintain it, and so we're having to go back and we're having to redo what we, you know, I just don't want us to get into that. So the maintenance piece is definitely important, but also understanding, as long as I've been on the board, we've always tried to basically share the wealth between 4 or 5 schools when we're talking about athletics. And there may just come a time where we just can't share because the money is just not big enough and the needs are too great at all the schools. So we just may have to figure out some way to rotate that through. And I'm not saying we do that this year, but I do think that in the future that's something we're going to have to do.
So, sorry, Mr. Pointer, what it is you need some more money.
You said it, I didn't, but yes, absolutely.
You need some more money.
Absolutely.
And so, period. I mean, you know, we allocate a lot of things for different things, but athletics is important because there are several children. That's what gets us going. We go to those games. We go, you know, cheering on, but they do have to have their things. But what I look at and I see here, and like you said, through the standard is providing quality, safe, and compliance, equitable, adequate teaching, instructional, athletic facilities. So I'm understanding where this is coming from. In the pod with what you have, trying to make do what you have. You're trying to, because the ending I see on there is distributing funds need-based. Period. It's a need. It's not something that's, negotiable. It's a need for safety, for other things. So we're going to have to just get together, and because you proposed us the last time, and it wasn't clear, whatever, but maybe with the million before now, would have might been at a different place. But we'll try to, come together, talk together, and do better at making sure our athletic studies and our athletic things for children is on top notch, because it does attract. And when the community is involved and people see growth through that, it attracts where people want their children to go. So that helps out overall. But we do have to take care of needs and safety. And I see Title IX on there, bleachers compliance, things like that, safety issues. We have to make sure it's falling in line. So thank you for your work.
Mr. Moore.
Okay, I'll just say one more short thing, because I think Ms. Parker brought up something important that as a board and for the 12.5 people that watch this video after the fact, that they should be mindful of as well. We do have to, she has a very good point, and again, people need to understand this, because the community is going to have questions about that too, because when it comes up that next year, and I'm just random numbers, that we have $500,000 to spend, and we need to spend $350,000 on the tennis courts at just Central High School, or we need to spend $400,000 on a concession stand and restroom at just one other school, that we as a board and the public need to understand that we put some time into this process, that's going to come up. And we are doing all of our schools a disservice if at that point we start regressing to just our schools and trying to do some protectionism there. And I think that's just something we all as board members and as a public need to be mindful of. There will come a time when it's going to be 95% of what we have to spend that year has got to go to one project. And we need to be patient with that and understand that it is a long process, and it's going to take multiple years to get there. And we, and I'm including myself in that, need to make sure that we are mindful of that process when it does get a little difficult to explain to your constituents why we're having to spend the bulk sum of that at one school. And it will come up.
Okay, I don't see any more lights, but I want, what is the board's wishes? Do we want to put this agenda to accept item, the third one, or just to say we trust the work you've done and we're going to give you $500,000 based on what you've presented?
I'll speak up to that. I'm okay with going with what his recommendations are, and not having to vote on this as an item.
That's right. Just to go on and allocate the $500,000, which we said in a work session that we wanted to spend, but rather than to earmark him and keep him completely as he sees his needs. All right. Is that okay? And Mr. Pointer, thank you so much for the work that you've done. I appreciate it, and hopefully that'll make a better working document for you to be able to use the money best that you can and spread the wealth.
No, thank you guys. I know this has been a long road and a long journey, and we still have far to go, but at least we got one step we've accomplished collectively together, and I'm appreciative, and I thank you all for the support.
Moving on, I know that you all would probably like a break, but if I let you all take a break, then it's going to be forever. What do you think? Keep going or 5 minutes? Keep going. Keep going, okay. 5 minutes. Huh? 5 minutes. Oh, Lord. No? Ms. Hopkins?
You're the board chair. You're the board chair.
All right.
Okay.
All right, then I'm going to move on. I would like to meet our new HR person, and he's been sitting there patiently, and policies are next up, so come up to the microphone. I'm sorry, I know. Go do what you need to do. We'll be here. The first thing is a final adoption. Nothing there. Okay, next is a proposed policy required to be posted. Is there any discussion of that? That's the whole book, isn't it?
Yes, that's the whole book.
And all of you read them all, right? Huh?
It was my understanding that this would come up in November, so.
Yeah, it's about 3.4.2 was just the policy manual. For section 3 only. Huh? Okay. So moving next is the, policy, let's see, who?
That's me.
That, Dr. Marzak brought that for discussion.
Gotcha, yes, and, let me go on.
I'm turned up.
Okay, gotcha, sorry, okay, not a problem. So, I'd like to recommend to the board, to take language from a former board policy used to have 1.500, which provides the board with a more in-depth explanation and rationale of the employment and usage of the board attorney. So if you pull up that former policy, 1.500, what I'm asking the board to do is to take paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 directly from 1.500 and add it to 1.302. If you pull up 1.302, basically the policy just says that the board shall employ a legal counsel. That's all it says. And so I think that this language in sections 2, 3, and 4 provides greater clarity and depth, not only for the board but also for the public, about the role of the board attorney and what the board attorney is supposed to do and cannot do. So it provides, I believe, a little bit greater transparency and a little bit more direction. So I'm asking the board to be able to allow that language to be added into to board policy 1.302.
Is there any discussion?
And I'll have that for the board meeting next Tuesday, that direct language put in there.
Okay.
So was 1.500, in what year was it taken out, and 1 point whatever
Gotcha.
put in?
I know exactly what you're talking about. So, yes. So it was issued in 2013, and then it was reissued again in 2007, or 2007 to 2013. And from what I understanding with history, when we went to the TSBA policy for board attorney, the TSBA blanket policy got put in, which just said the board shall employ an attorney, but none of the other specific language was put in to clarify that role. So I asked Mr. Wolliver for a little bit of history, and then this is the former policy that was brought up, and I think this provides greater clarity, greater understanding, and greater direction with concerns to the board attorney.
Well, that's what I was about to ask. I guess Mr. Dudley would be the only one I think that could answer. Well, maybe Mr. Beaver.
I'll gladly speak to that.
Okay.
Since a couple of years ago, we felt like as a board that there was kind of a mess with policy. It was all over the place. It had been written, rewritten. It wasn't kind of continuous in some forms. So we went and spoke to TSBA. Sorry, it's getting late. And they basically took a sample policy, and we tried our best to take what we wanted from our current policy and go with their sample policy and kind of meld the two together and come up with a document. I think we did a pretty good job of it. That would be up for, there's some things that could be gone back and that we got rid of. We've actually had that happen a few times where we have realized we got rid of a policy we shouldn't have, or we may have still had duplicates in place. It's a pretty long document, so there were some of those. This could be considered one of those instances where we could go back and look at what we used to have. We didn't intentionally get rid of that language. We just it kind of fell out when we swapped over, if that makes more sense.
I'm kind of confused. Am I looking at the policy, is the attachment to the policy as you want it written, or is it the old policy?
So what you currently see here is the old policy, but sections 2, 3, or paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 will be taken verbatim and added to policy 1.302, which we currently have.
Okay, I'm with you now.
Yes, ma'am, not a problem. And my mistake, I thought I had loaded it to the agenda. I loaded policy 1.500. I have policy 1.302, but I didn't load it, and that was my mistake.
But you'll have it on the, for the board meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any discussion about that? Ms. Parker?
I disagree with David a little bit in that we did actually talk, I remember, about this policy and the additional language that was in it. And we chose, I think I may have actually, I don't know if I know I was doing policy or I was board chair at the time. And part of it is, I don't think that talking to the attorney who is supposed to make sure that we all stay in legal compliance, that we necessarily should have to go through the board chair or through the director or superintendent. One of the things that I think maybe precipitated Dr. Marzak asking for this was an email, and, I mean, I'll just go ahead and acknowledge I was the board member that spoke to Mr. Wooliver about it, but I was asking Mr. Wooliver for a legal interpretation of a contract. I don't know that I would need to go to Dr. Marzak or to Ms. Kinzer to ask for a legal interpretation of a contract if I'm trying to make sure that I'm staying in compliance, or we as a system are staying in compliance. I just think that we have two employees as a board, and that's Dr. Marzak and that's Mr. Wooliver. And I don't know why we would have to go through one of our employees to talk to one of our other employees. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that was, I think the existing policy basically just says we're going to employ a legal counsel, and then it gives all of us as board members the authority or the right, I guess, to speak to Mr. Wooliver, and he's always been very gracious to answer our questions. And even, I would say, when this other policy was in existence, I think he's always tried to err on the side of making sure that we as board members stay on the straight and narrow.
I want to speak to it because I cannot imagine if a board member wanted to speak to Mr. Wooliver that I would need or want to make that decision. They may have a reason that they wouldn't want to share with me at that point because they weren't sure that it was something that they needed to bring up as well. So I don't know what I'm looking at other than I realize that language is there, but the other one simply has language that we employ. Is that right? So we're not even looking at that, so it's hard to compare the two. So as a board chair, if Ms. Parker had come to me and said, do you mind if I talk to Mr. Wooliver, I probably would have looked at her like, what? You know, of course. And I would for any board member. That's just the way I feel. I don't think you'd have to, I don't think that's necessary, but Mr. Dudley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I hope we as a board have improved, but in the past we had some board members that wanted to tie up Mr. Wooliver's phone over a lot of trivial issues, where they were upset with another board member and then this and that. And so I think that's where some of that language came from, was trying to keep our legal cost within reasonable amount, because we had some board members that were just constantly on the phone, and it wasn't information that they needed. It was more or less they was trying to find a way of stirring the pot. So I think that's where some of that language has come from. I feel like the members we have now should have the right to talk with Mr. Wooliver and ask him reasonable questions. And you know, I don't see there's any need for the past need to get approval from somebody else.
Yes, I need a light. The next policy, Ms. Parker brought forward, gifts and bequests.
Oh, can I
Yes, please, I'm sorry.
Am I to assume that we're not taking any action on this, or it's not gonna go on the full agenda, or what, as a board?
I assume it will be on the full agenda, but it won't be on consent. Or how do you all feel? It's you brought it forward.
Yes, ma'am. It's my recommendation to the school board to provide greater clarity on the role of the board attorney. The word alone is board attorney, not board member attorney. And so realize that every time he picks his phone up or every time he answers an email, the clock is ticking. And so he bills the school system for that amount of money. If that amount goes over at the end of the year, then we pull from other funds to be able to cover those amounts. But as he works, and so the idea, I believe, is that if the board chair has an idea of how many times that Mr. Wooliver is being called, and that person has an idea of how many times the district is being billed for those costs, it's just to provide greater clarity, not only to the board, but also the community on the role of the board attorney. That's the only reason that it's there. And, you know, the board, as per the policy, the board chair doesn't have to ask the board member why that they want to speak to the board attorney. It's just so that you have an indication, or whoever the board chair is in the future, has an indication of this.
Which may change
the board,
immediately.
the board attorney is being tasked. Because if multiple people have multiple questions, and the board attorney may be contacted 5 times in a week, at this point, we're not really sure how often that happens until the bill comes in and the money is also due. But that gives the board chair an opportunity to say, wow, a lot of people are contacting the board attorney for individual reasons. Maybe there's some kind of greater discussion we need to have here. Maybe there's some kind of talk we need to have. So it's just to provide greater transparency, greater direction, greater guidelines for the board attorney, if you will. That's just the idea.
If that's the case, I don't know if I could ask that we put this to the work session for next month and have an actual copy of what you're looking for to discuss, and we could discuss it. If you don't mind, I would prefer not to have this come on the agenda and then kind of hash this out, because if you would like to have it, I'll go into a further discussion of what each line item is if we're going to do that. That's what we've done in the past with policy. So if we could move that to the next work session, is that okay with you?
Sure. And I've got it. It's on my computer.
Okay. I'd just rather have it for us to be able to discuss in full, line by line.
And consider this, what if they
Yes,
want
ma'am.
to talk to the attorney about the board chair?
It's a great
There you
question.
go.
But
I mean,
but you don't ask them, why do you need to talk to the board attorney?
If I've done something that's improper, or I've done something, wrong, I should think they'd have the right to speak to the attorney if they felt the need, without calling and saying, what the issue was.
Yes.
I can't imagine that I would not allow you to speak to the board attorney unless, and of course, that it's not about me.
Good point.
No, I'm sorry, it is getting late. Okay, then we're gonna put it on the next work session, if that's all right. Mr. Wilbur, you may speak.
No, Mr. Beaver.
Oh, Mr. Beaver.
Or Fulbright.
And Fulbright.
Well, Mr. Wilbur, he's sitting right here. How many useless phone calls do you get in a month? From board members?
I've never had a useless phone call from a board member.
How many people wanna call and just chat with you?
Well, I see it from both sides. Mr. Dudley made a good point. The reason this thing came up, way back when, believe it or not, this is my 15th year of representing the school board. We had some folks that would just camp out at the office. I mean, we had a couple of board members that were abusing it, and, Director Hickman at the time said, "I'm not paying this bill," and and Dr. Marzak is the gatekeeper on the bill. So when it goes to his office, then obviously he's looking at to see what activity there's been. So I see both sides of it. You pay for the tune and I dance is the way I look at it. I'll do what you want to do, but I understand Dr. Marzak's point that it could get out of control. You guys have been really good. You haven't abused it, but I could see that being an issue. So I'll do whatever the board's wish is on that, along those lines.
I just want to make a request, Doug. As part of the information gathering for the next work session, could we get an amount of the overages that we've had over the last year or so, please? Yeah. Sure. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, then we'll move on.
Sorry.
Oh, excuse me, have I got a light that I don't see?
Well, since Mr. Fulbright suggested, I think he makes a good point. Can you also look at, of the charges, what's come directly from a board member request? Because when I look at the bill, there's a lot of time that it's a lot of staff. It's not board members that are picking up the phone and incurring thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, we've got special ed. I mean, I'm picking on you, Lisa, but yeah, Lisa gets a lot. Stan had a lot. I mean, there's a lot of staff that has to make that call. So I'm just curious what board members actually are requesting.
Is there a particular year range, how many years we want to go back?
You're the expert, you can...
I'll just do 3 years. Let's do 3 years. Yeah.
Anyone else now speak on, this will go to the workshop. Thank you so much, Mr. Laconon. Now, Ms. Parker brought the next policy, if you want to discuss that.
I suggested the addition of, item 6 on this policy.
Oh, it's me.
Sorry. Namely, you know, we were talking about the kids on stage contracts, and I think that personnel and stipends and all that is totally within Dr. Marzak's realm to do as he wishes. But I do think that if there was some concern that had been raised about whether or not that was going to incur employee costs to us over and above what we had already paid, and it sounds like that all got worked out, but just if that were to be an issue, I think we as a board need to know, because that's going to have an impact on our budget, an impact on what we have to allocate for someone. So again, that way, if gifts are going to be made, you know, it still gives Dr. Marzak the authority to accept those gifts on behalf of the board, but if there's going to be some additional costs associated with it, then I think that that should have to come to us, because we don't want to just accept a bus if that means we've also now got to hire a new person, or, you know, and then pay all this FICA, all that stuff that goes along with it.
I'll let you speak, Dr. Marzak, but I don't see a problem with it myself. I think it kind of protects us in that down, and it leaves the question that we may or may not have, and hopefully it's been pretty answered tonight on that one, but in any other entity as well, not just kids on stage, but any entity. And we do want people to donate and participate in helping our schools and all that sort of things, and stipends for those are just really important, and it's a great thing, but I think it protects us.
Well, I will say too, it's not just kids on stage. I mean, there's been an issue that's been raised to the board via email on some other things. No, an Algebra 1 teacher that's recently.
Oh,
so,
right.
I mean, you know, if there's costs associated with that and it's going to cost us more money, then that may not be a gift that we want to accept, I think. But at the same time, if it fills a need and there's a benefit to the children, we just need to be able to weigh that cost, I think. So that was really the whole purpose of item 6.
That's okay, I am Mr. Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it. So, Ms. Parker, good point. Question, can you help me understand what's the difference between number 2 and number 6?
So the way that this was written, I felt like was talking about more so equipment, was when I looked at it. I guess it does say services.
Yeah, because that's what I was noticing too. Because if I take out equipment, contribution of services that may involve major costs for installation, maintenance, or initial or continuing financial commitments shall be presented by the superintendent for board consideration and approval.
Well, I was just
That's the
assuming
only
since
reason.
you didn't bring that to us for our consideration or approval that it didn't apply.
Okay.
Yeah, major costs are different.
Yeah, major costs, it could be, that's different to everybody, you know, so. I like it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yes, sir.
Since this is a financial policy that falls under Section 2, it'll need to be approved by the Financial Management Board as well, just FYI.
So, once we approve it, then it could go to the Financial Management Board. Okay. No, it would automatically. I would still feel more comfortable if we approved it by vote. That'd be fine. We can either put this on consent, or we can put it on new business to vote. What do you think? I'm okay with consent. Are you? Anyone else? Okay. All right. Okay, seeing no, the next one item is the Murray County School Board liaison positions. Once again, I think, you know, when I came up with wanting to, I didn't come up with it, but just the idea that you all would have certain areas in which you would be using the term liaison connected to in some way and helping out. Dr. Marzak has presented these policies. Is there any discussion about it? Mr. Beaver?
Okay, with the way I read this,
It's not a
Could-
policy. Yeah, go ahead.
it's not a policy.
Uh-uh.
We're not asking it to be a policy.
Mm-mm. I don't think so.
Okay. But the way I read this, and I thought was proposing this to be a policy. All right, but, what's the difference in what we're talking about here than going back to committee? Well, we got a work session here, we got the way I say this, it'd be a committee.
I didn't write these. Dr. Marzak presented them.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Marzak.
Yes, ma'am. So the way, Mr. Beaver, the way I understand, this liaison position, let's say, for example, that Dr. Woodard, has a curriculum meeting during the course of the day. Throughout the course of that meeting and multiple meetings, if Ms. Parker wishes to serve on that committee, Dr. Woodard would invite her to those meetings. She would be there, she would interact with the group, and if something needed to come to the board for approval, then she could serve as a liaison to that committee to explain what was talked about, why the committee came up with those recommendations, and why it needs to be funded. So these are not after-school meetings. The board member doesn't lead it, the board member participates in it. That's the way that I understood the liaison position from Ms. Kinzer. They are an advocate between the school system employees to the board to help understand why certain actions and recommendations may be coming to the board. That's the way I read it.
But we're gonna have the board member and Dr. Woodard explain if the way that what Dr. Woodard is proposing and the board member disagrees, then we're gonna sit before the board and the board decide. I mean, I just don't understand this, is what I'm saying.
So in discussions with Ms. Kinzer about the role and position of the liaison is to carry information from the committee, not necessarily one person, but from the committee to the board level, to say, this is what we discussed, this is what we came up with, this is what the committee talked about, and this is the reason why it's on the board agenda. So it's the way I see it is that the liaison and the person presenting it, in this case would be Dr. Woodard, would be working together on behalf of what the committee recommended, if that makes sense.
I personally think, and, it's like we've opened a can of worms in a way, but, I really just thought it was an opportunity for the board members to have that connection and input, period. Not to say they're in charge of it or anything, or feel like they have to make a report. We've already got enough reports that everybody on the board doesn't need to report on their particular thing. But if I asked Mr. Beaver to be that kind of connection with Mr. Hall or Mr. Perriman with zoning and facilities, then he could understand better, and he may not speak to it, but he would have that connection if in case we needed that. And one of the reasons this came up because we wanted to have the teacher round table. And that was something that Ms. Parker felt like that she could help organize, and I think it's a great thing to do, and I think you all have done it in the past, and it was very successful. I don't know what I'm asking of you all. I just felt like that maybe as board members that we need to be maybe more involved than just coming to a meeting and then leaving and going home and not thinking about it anymore. Just have that area. No more meetings, no. No, you can have your discussion with Mr. Hall if you have a question about something or as to how you're going to work with, to understand what the needs are. That's all. I'm not, we don't have to have liaison positions, and I don't know how it got so complicated, but here it is. Mr. Moore.
I would agree. I think it's gotten a little more complicated than we intended. I know when I first started talking about this, I guess my intention was more the direction of ad hoc committees when necessary, with the defined, and keeping in mind that would be an actual board entity that would be created by board members, and we'd have a defined, the chair would be able to sign that. For example, if we had 3 of us, we would create an ad hoc committee on budget. We would have a defined time when that would be over. That was my original thought. I know it kind of blew up from there. This, to me, does not feel like what I had envisioned. And that's just where I'm at. And again, I'm really kind of hyper-focusing on the budget piece because that was something I felt like that I wanted us to make sure we had some input in, again, for a defined period before we actually submit the budget. And then it goes to the full board at that point, just to make sure we didn't miss some of the things on the end of the budget season that we've all talked about that kind of get lost in the 6 months or 8 months between the time. So that was my intention. This, to me, I don't really see a purpose in this, any beyond what we already do. I mean, if a board member wants to become hyper involved with what Mr. Perryman does and wants to really engross themselves in how that functions, I think we already have that ability as board members to get to know what he does and try to understand that better, and then even speak up at a meeting and express what you may have learned in meeting with staff on that. So I think we already have that ability. I'm not sure this really gets us anywhere other than adding some complexity.
I agree, and I didn't mean to make it quite this complicated, but I do think that when there's a need, that an ad hoc committee budget is one of the reasons that he came to me about wanting to do the budget. She was interested in curriculum. I know that some of you have special interests. Diploma is the same sort of thing that Mrs. Morency, with diploma and all the work that she has done, which hopefully you can report on a little bit before we leave today. So that's what I was thinking. I don't know that we need all these parameters. If we become a problem, then I know you'll speak up about it. But I don't think that having all that guidelines is going to change anything in particular. So would it be all right if we just put that off into the sunset somewhere? If we need to come back to it, we can. Okay? Anybody else? Okay, then moving on. Are y'all just seeing how long I can go here? But, the end is kind of near, maybe. I know. But we got a pretty big thing next, and that's the attorney contract. Mr. Williver's contract is up for renewal. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay. No discussion. We'll move on then. Instructional bids, purchases over $10,000. What is that one? Nothing. Well, we've got speech contracted services. We've got any discussion on that one? Bid 20-016. If no discussion, we'll put it on consent. Excuse me.
Can I go backwards to the, I'm sorry.
I know.
I'm behind.
I couldn't believe that lights weren't on there.
Okay, so just some general questions. When is the current contract up? I went backwards to the the attorney contract.
Yes.
Sorry. Because I see that this one is recommending that it to be a start date of December 1st. I'm assuming, okay, the other one is over then November.
I believe that's right. I think you all did 39 months the last time this came up. I think you wanted to get it away from election cycles, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And I would ask too, I know we've talked about this last, I swear we talked about it, about having some more lead time on discussing this. Were the board to decide that they wanted to go a different direction, it seems to me that waiting until roughly a month out from when the contract's up is probably a poor time to let Jake know that we're changing services. It's obviously probably a poor time as a board to make that decision as well with a short time lead. So, again, this comes up again. It's kind of frustrating that we're back discussing this 30 days out from when the contract's up.
Oh, I'll stay on and provide any services you need. If you decide you want to go a different direction, I don't have any problem with that. I'm not going to leave you high and dry.
No, I do appreciate that. I guess I've brought this up 1.5 million times over the last few years of just we would prefer to, as a board, I think it's functionally a better thing for us to have that lead time, for us to be able to have discussions without feeling like we need to, and that's not just for this contract, obviously, this would be for any contract or any agreement we have. I think we've always talked about trying to build in some time on that.
Well, we could change the length of it, we could do whatever length.
But it's still up in about,
Exactly, but I'm
32
just
days.
saying, if you wanted more lead time, the next cycle, it wouldn't have to wait.
well, somebody would need to bring it to us.
Yes,
Well,
sooner.
I don't think Jake wanted us to, like, shorten the time period the last
Yeah, I
time
don't-
we
yeah.
got into that.
We did get into that last time, yeah.
We got into that, I think 4 versus 3 or versus 2 or whatever, and it wasn't fair to him because he's gotta hire staff to support.
So again, gets to the point of, I think it would be more appropriate for us to have, I know this is for next time we do this, but for us to have some more lead time to have a better discussion.
6 months,
I think that's appropriate.
3 months,
3 months.
lead time.
I think 6 months is appropriate.
But for this particular one, it should be new business, so that
It is, and there is, there's no change in the rates.
That's correct. It's all the
Thank you.
same. It's just
Okay.
renewing it for another 3 years.
That was the only question, thank you.
All right, any other questions or discussion we can have at the meeting next week? All right, we've got bids for speech. Ralph had moved on here. Any questions about that one? 4.2.1. We also have a bid for, a grant for middle school. $244,000. Tell us about that.
That's a grant from the state.
Okay, I would assume that would be on consent as well, we certainly won't turn that down. The next one is 20-020, which is textbook, right? Any discussion on that?
I do.
How soon will we get those?
We'll be ordering from Tennessee Book Company, and they're telling us about 2 to 3 weeks.
Is this based on what's in the existing budget, or is this for spending of fund balance?
This was based upon, yes, fund balance, the additional money that was voted on at the board retreat.
Okay, my understanding was when we were gonna have the roundtable was that we were gonna talk about curriculum, that was part of the purpose of it, and we talked about doing that in November. So I kinda feel like this is a little premature to vote on this at the beginning of November if we really wanna have a discussion with teachers about what curriculum resources they need.
We really hadn't voted on using that fund balance money yet. We were gonna put that out until I'm just, my memory was. Did you have more to say?
No,
Okay.
that was just.
Mr. Dudley?
Well, I want some clarification over the retreat issues. I didn't think anything voted on or brought up at the retreat is official. It has to come before, be brought up in one of our normal meetings, before it can be, followed through with. And then so I just wanna make that clear that what was brought up at the retreat doesn't carry any official weight.
I'd like to say a couple words just about this proposal. We've had extensive conversation about where we are as a district with regard to resources, and we've talked about what we need in order to improve academic performance. We need the resources. And I know we had some discussion around forming committees and things like that, but I feel like there's a sense of urgency and we're in go time. Initially, I presented a budget for $858,000 to purchase the things that you see on this list. What was approved was $316,000. And so at the retreat, we had conversation around reallocating the additional $542,000 that would get us the things that we needed for this year. Obviously, we would love to have any support that the board is willing to give us, but these are some things that we just need right now. We've had extensive conversation about Algebra 1. We'd like to purchase 1,055 Algebra 1 books, which puts an Algebra 1 book in the hand of every kid in the district that's taking the course right now, and that will be at a cost of about $82,000. Our foreign language books are in really bad shape. I was joking with Chris Pointer last week. We were going around looking at facilities, and I was joking with Chris Pointer about the fact that he was a 2000, maybe 2002 graduate from Central, and the books that he used when he was in high school are still there. So we need new Spanish books, new French books, and we wanted to start with Spanish 1 and French 1, and then next year go with Algebra 2, and then replace Spanish 2, and then replace French 2. We also offer Latin, and speaking with our Latin instructor this year, they felt they could hold off, and we do not offer German this year. We're not offering German, so we just want to replace Spanish, French, and Algebra 1 and outfit them with a decent set of books. Then, of course, we'd like to beef up our ELA resources. I've given you guys samples of the just TN Ready samples. I wanted you guys to get some samples in your hand of what the TN Ready test just kind of looks like. This is kind of our some samples from the retired TN Ready test versions. I just chose 7th grade ELA, and then I have an Algebra 1 sample, and you can see the level of rigor in this Algebra 1 sample. I apologize for the way that stapled is stapled at the bottom lower right corner. Apologize about that, but you can see on the next page, on the second page, it says enter an expression equivalent to, and then it has a problem here. And so here's like a constructed response sample where students have to actually, as opposed to just doing computation, they have to actually explain their answers, and they have to actually type in the right answer. And then, of course, that is usually human scored. And so it's a lot different. These tests are much more rigorous than what we've seen before. It's not the algebra that we all did when we were in school. Much more rigorous, much more application, and much more critical thinking around algebraic concepts than what we've seen before. And so, you know, we need the support. If we want to see our kids make the progress, then we need the materials, and we need to outfit our teachers with the materials so that kids can be successful. And that's why I'm asking for the Algebra 1 books at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, each and every year when we go back to hunting for things to cut, books is always something that is one of the first things that's brought up and one of the first things that's cut. But the board has never done that lightly, and each of every time it was brought up to cut books, a question was asked of the administration, can you make it without those books? And the administrators say, yes, we can do it, no problem. Well, if cutting those books is a problem, we need to be told that. You know, I mean, you know, there's no reason, and of course we as board members can't keep up with every year's books to determine which vision or which printing of a specific book we're using. That's up to the staff to keep up with. And then so if Mr. Pointer is pointing out that hey, we're using stuff that was in there when he was a student, you're probably still using books when I was a student. And I graduated in '75, so I mean it wouldn't surprise me if we don't still use some of them. But I need the administrators to stand up and say, hey, we can't keep putting off these book purchases. You know, we need them, and so, you know, I know the board shares its part of not being adamant to the commission to stand up that we need book purchases, but I need everybody when we get into budget season to hey, stand up and say, hey, we can't keep cutting the book budget each and every year. Oftentimes when we do get the books, we're already at the end of the year. You know, I was hoping hoping that if we purchase books, we could get them here in a timely fashion, but it sounds like if we say we want to buy the books, then we got to go back to get approval from the commission before we can take them out of fund balance. You know, and so when we actually get them, May the 29th, you know, that doesn't do this year's students very much good.
I just wanted to see if we could potentially move this maybe to after we're able to have a round table with the teachers. I just really feel like that was one of the focuses that we wanted to have when we had a round table, was to talk to them about the actual curriculum resources that they felt like they needed. And like Mr. Dudley said, I don't think these teachers are going to have this before January, just based on the time frame that we're looking at. Even if it takes 2 weeks to get them in and it has to go through budget amendments, commission, all of that. I am a huge advocate for kids having books in their hands. I've said that from day one, but I don't want to just throw something together and not have it be our best effort. And, you know, sometimes what one person says is not what another person says. And I just feel like we really need to do this right. We need to have these conversations. And, you know, I agree with you, Mr. Dudley. I feel like textbooks need to be in the budget, and they don't need to be things that we're cutting to at the last minute, because it just results in these kids, at a minimum, they've had 3 months without some of these resources that we're now hearing that they really need. So,
any other discussion? I personally would rather see the teachers have a round table and have discussion, for the reason that they're the ones that have seen us cut it every year, not provided. And every school's kind of got different needs as well. So I would hope maybe you could schedule one pretty soon to get some teachers together to have some input. What are their needs? I think it would be really important to let them know that we want to hear from them. I know. Yes, sir.
we talked about having that round table at the end of November during the PD day. So less than a month from now.
I guess, thank you, Ms. Parker. I guess I misunderstood. I thought the purpose of the round table was to discuss how we use funding for FY21 for that year's budget, and that anything that we had now additional is going to take care of this year's needs. The Algebra 1 books are pressing. We have listened to teachers. We're hearing them say, we need the resources. We need the resources. We need the ELA resources that we have on this list also in grades K. We've heard them say they need these resources. I don't want to see us wait on this. I'd like to see us go forward. Worst case scenario, they do get here a little later than we thought, but at least we have something for even half the year if we want to see scores improve. I don't understand why we would wait on that. I think what you could potentially wait on is the $202,000 for the K Ready Math. You can see here I had K Ready Math. What I'd like to see us do is go ahead and commit to it again, so the teachers know that for the third year in a row that K-8 we would have these resources for them. That's $202,000. So if you held off on that and went forward with the Algebra 1, Spanish, and French books, and with the ELA resources, we'd be extremely pleased, and we think it'd be a great direction to move in for the district. It would be a big help. It would get us a big leg up. As we mentioned before, we are out of our cycle. Okay, the adoption cycles go in 6-year waves. We're 2 adoption cycles behind. So that's 12 years for not having the appropriate aligned math curriculum books, and we're behind in several of our subject areas. So what we're trying to do is really just start catching up. Per the BEP formula, we should be spending about $969,000 annually. We spend about a third of that. So at some point we have to catch up. And so I think when you meet with the teachers and you have a round table, you get a mix of opinions, and it's hard sometimes to reach consensus. We have some that want to move in a really tech-driven direction. We have some that want to take a more traditional approach, and then we have some who are kind of in the middle, who are willing to just kind of go with whatever direction the consensus the group wants to move in. And so I'd really like to see us move forward with this now, but I respect whatever the board would like to do, and, I thank you for the opportunity tonight just to, ask. Thanks.
Okay, I guess I wanna hear from the teachers. Some of these things I'm having trouble understanding what we're gonna get from them next month that's gonna change some of it. I mean, like, I'm not expecting to see, a change in the French or Spanish books, or is that, I mean, because my assumption is that central office is already going through a yearly process of looking at that and talking with staff on what the appropriate books to use that are gonna fit in with the aligned, what the state allows, which is a pretty narrow window anyway, from what I understand, of what books they allow. I'm just not sure on some of those. Now, some of the other ones, I absolutely, I think when we get into the elementary school level, some of those books seem like resources at that level. I could see some variability there, but I'm just not sure what we're gonna, delaying some of these doesn't make sense to me. If someone can explain that to me, I'd be glad to go, but it's, Algebra 1 books, just get those ordered and get them in our kids' hands. I don't know what's gonna change on that, from a roundtable, but if someone can explain what would functionally change, I'd love to hear it.
My question is, why do we not already have them? Why are we offering Algebra 1 with no algebra books? That makes no sense to me. I mean, my understanding would be that we're offering Algebra 1, so we have some resources that we're currently using. And if I'm a teacher, I would imagine I prepared all year to use that particular thing. I know last year, I already got dropped on elementary school teachers, whatever the book, the ELA program was. I mean, teachers were getting that when they got back to school in January. They were getting resources and being told they had to teach these units and had no time to prepare. The summer is when I would think you would want to be preparing. Like, that's part of what we talked about with this allocation, is that we wanted to make sure that teachers weren't just thrown resources, because you know what happens when we throw resources at them? They sit on the shelves. And they're like, well, we didn't use those. We didn't get proper training on those resources. So that's the other part that we've got to talk about when we talk about textbooks. We've got to talk about what type of training are we doing. I'll give you an example. I know that there's a private school that sent all their teachers to go to a workshop in Chicago, and it was very beneficial for them. Is that what we need to do? Are MAP sessions cutting it? I don't know. But those are the conversations that I'm expecting to have with teachers at the round table, to make sure that we're not just throwing good money after bad. I mean, as well as anybody, I want to make sure that we have resources. And to me, it's not a digital thing, because we've already allocated money for digital things. So this is books in their hands. That's all we're talking about. But I do think that it would be nice for them to have that stuff tomorrow. But you know what? It would have been nice for them to have it on August 1st, and I'm kind of surprised that they didn't have it on August 1st. I don't know if that falls, I guess that falls back on us as a board for not providing it. Oh, I know. I wasn't here for that meeting, but I do know. I wish that we hadn't, but I mean, that's what, because we made a decision to cut something, I don't think we should rush to try to put a Band-Aid on that if we need to triage it. I mean,
But that's why they don't have them now, is because
but we're still offering the classes, so they still have to have something that they're using, in theory.
I can answer that, Ms. Parker. Yes, we have class sets, but we think that if we could get books for every kid, that of course that extends to additional practice and homework, et cetera. We could do a little more. And even the class sets that we have, we're talking about books that are very old and not aligned to the rigor of the new standards, and so it's just a challenge. We just need the materials. And again, we're just asking very humbly if possible, we'd like to have them.
So I guess I kind of struggle with is, this is the exact recommendation that you had prior to us cutting it out, right? Okay. So we never had a huge discussion about which algebra book to use during the budget cycle that I can recall. So I don't know what's changed between when we said, hey, we want to spend $800,000 on textbooks, and then when we had to cut it out, we cut these out, and now we're trying to add them back in. I'm not sure I'm not sure why we're debating why we want to add back in something. Like, I want to get these books in their hands yesterday, but how many different Algebra 1 books are there approved by the state of Tennessee with our standards? Is there that 3? Okay, so that's not a whole lot that we're looking at here. I'm just, we need to get these books in their hands. These are just additional resources that I feel like they need to have that we never should have cut out to begin with, but we did. So.
Is there any other discussion? Ms. Hopkins?
You don't like me.
Huh?
I had my light on a long time.
I can't.
I'm just kidding with you, Chair. But I think that's what is we're trying to say too, moving forward, that I guess it's never going to be, nothing's an easy fit, because that is true with the technology today and teachers teach in a different way. Some of your more old school teachers that's kind of hard in and trying to get technology, they might prefer to have the textbook because that's what they come from, that's what they know. But 21st, our age and young, beyond our age, under our age, coming from a technology standpoint, they might feel more comfortable with technology. But you have to, I think, find that, like I said, find that balance, and it's just what we decide as a whole. But you can't, beat up a teacher because they're not going to use a textbook, or you can't get mad at a teacher because they're not going to use the iPad all the way. Because we're in a place where that's just life, and technology's here. It's not going anywhere. But at the same time, books are very valuable. They teach kids things that the iPad can't teach them. And like he said, he brought up before, I forget what the plan was, Dr. Woodard, with the math skill book that you had passed around to us, that we got to see a sample of it. It was some really, what's it called? Ready Math. Good examples in there. So, like I said, it's just that balance. But if it's gonna help and not hurt, I think it's something that we need to look at if it's benefiting the students as a whole.
Any other lights on? And I have a witness here that says we cannot see your light. So you have to put it straight up like that, and then it comes on. Okay. Yeah, this is him, and he's right here. Okay. Any other discussion? Then this will be on the board agenda. We can vote on it then as well. Next is the Title I True Touch purchase. I'm losing this here. The next one to consent. What about the next? Okay. What are the operations low bids? I've lost my agenda here, so y'all have to tell me the numbers. The renewal of the Impero software, consent, bid number, the digital form automation system. Okay, it's just a bid, there's no attachment?
Yeah, that was on the last agenda, and we were talking about, it was on the board meeting around, let's wait till the bid closes out to see who all would bid on the digital forms, and CareMonkey was the only company that bid. They were the only ones. So we'd like to make a recommendation at the board meeting to approve the purchase of CareMonkey and the money coming out of fund balance to purchase that.
Okay, any discussion? All right, we'll leave that on new business. What about the...
Sorry, if I could, Dr. Marzak, remind me, we had some unlimited use for this, or...
Yes.
Yes. So we can use this multiple ways, however we choose during this time period.
Exactly. So we're currently using it to bring new employees in the system. We're currently using it for the lease of the computers, where the parents fill out the 3 individual forms per student. It can also be used for field trips. gosh, I'm trying to remember we're using it in people services to eventually get the
Short
handbook
answer
out.
being we have no limitations.
We have
Whatever
no
we come up
limitations.
and use, we have access to the software
Exactly.
for the period of time.
To take everything paperless in the district, exactly.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
All right, Mr.
Is this for the remainder of this year, or will it be for one calendar year from once it's approved?
It'll be for the remainder of this year. Remember, this
Okay.
was supposed to be added to the budget, and it was left out of the budget. So this would be for the remainder of this year. So that's an annual renewal, and that's massively discounted from the average price. We've been using CareMonkey for a couple years now, and so they want to maintain that partnership with us. So this is the price that they're offering.
Okay, but still want to leave it on new business, all right? The 4.3.3, Microsoft license renewal, consent, all right? And I've added, the proposed organizational chart. Mr. Moore asked for it to come back to the work session, and as did I. So, Mr. Pearman, do you want to plead your case here again?
Thank you for asking for it to come back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Also, it would have been, did you put it back on me, Dave? Okay. We did not change anything on it, simply because, when you asked for it to come back, we wanted to see what your feelings were, what your questions were on it. We did look into, and I know in the board session there was questions about the funding of it because it was through the MJD funds, and those were funds that came in for students. I went back into looking specifically at things that the operations team touched last year. The train packet, some of the energy savings that we've done through that. Those are a lot of things that even when Mr. Breeden was here, Mr. Hall was the boots on the ground for, and that construction side really worked through, our maintenance team worked through. We returned over $320,000 to the district just on energy savings alone in electricity and in natural gas. We didn't even search into water or the other things, propane, those types of things. So the work that the operations team did, we feel like put money into fund balance that could fund this with dollars that were never earmarked for students directly. And we feel like, and we brought up at the last meeting, we were trying to limit how much money there was, so we were asking to maybe freeze that construction manager to the end of the year. When we looked at how much we put back in off of those programs, we said if you were willing, we feel like you could not only fund the facility manager position, but the construction manager as well. And we really talked about that with the operations team, that this would be a good time maybe to bring those two positions in. We are closing out Battle Creek. We are finishing up some projects for this year. We have a referendum coming up in March that we are having to prepare for. What's going to happen if it passes? What's going to happen if it doesn't? Where are we going with McDowell? Where are we going with Spring Hill High School? What other things are there? And we feel like it would be a good time to maybe get this in place and have folks in place to really learn their positions, to really set our side, and then when that rolled around in March, be really ready to roll. But we did find money, other than the money that was brought to you last time, that rolled into fund balance that was never earmarked specifically for students or direct services. So questions you have, we didn't change anything, we just brought it back for you.
So I'll just lay out what I wanted to. My main point with this, and I think it's something we've talked about probably ever since we brought on Hewlett Spencer, is I have had the belief that the construction manager position saves us far more than what that position cost us as a district. And I think especially I know Jamie left, while I really appreciate what they've done, I feel like, and I go back to when I first came on the board, and as a board I felt like we were kind of in charge of some pretty large construction projects without really any knowledge and really having an advocate in our place. And again, while I like what Hewlett Spencer brings to the table, I really feel like having an advocate on staff in the form of a construction manager protects our interests in some ways as much as Jake does sitting behind me right here from a legal standpoint. And I will maintain, although it's hard to put a dollar figure on that sometimes, I think I just, in other business aspects, it seems like that's just gonna be a net gain for us to be able to protect our interests, have someone that is able to take projects. We're in here talking about a lot of these sports projects. They're gonna cost us money, and having somebody on staff that can make sure we're getting those dollars stretched as far as possible, I think is a wise addition to the organizational chart. And that was really my main goal for wanting to bring this back and discuss it further. Probably my biggest heartache when we were talking about this at the previous meeting was, I'm never a fan of using potential incoming money, regardless of whether it's a sure thing or not. I just don't like that shell game of moving things around. So that was kind of one of my problems with wanting to approve it previously. But I really think we ought to have that position. I think we ought to get one as soon as possible. I think we really, at a district our size and what our needs are and what our building needs are coming up on, that we need that, and it will save us money in the long run. So that was my main reason. I don't know what Chair Kinzer's reasonings was, but that was me.
My reason is that was ditto, of course, everything he said, but I also think we have an opportunity. Dave Hall has saved us way more money than he will cost, and he'll be elevated into a position. He'll be able to choose that person working under him. I think that I want to keep him here. I don't want surrounding county or anybody else to take him away from us. I think that just the engineering background he has and all that, and that was one of the reasons I wanted you all to relook at this, so that we can solidify his position, make the organizational chart such we've got a brand new position here, Mr. Perriman, with his experience, and he's worked almost everywhere in the county. So what a good opportunity for us to take that operational chart and just kind of tweak it so that it's functioning really well. And losing Stan was a huge blow, but I know that Stan really depended on Dave and the rest of the staff, and I want to keep them, and I want them going forward to protect our interests. And if you tell me that they have put $350,000 into fund balance by savings, then I believe that, and I think maybe we need to acknowledge that. So that's why I wanted to bring it back.
And I would just remind, I said at the last meeting, this is a chart that has been with us for a while. The tweak was on the side that I left, in that we split safety and transportation into two spots. That's really the only tweak we made after Mr. Breeden left. And the reason it came about was just with that timing. We didn't see him leaving. This was something that he kept saying, we're going to push this back to them when the time's right. And the first thing he said to me after all of this was, you need to push this. This time is now. This is the natural time. And I will say one thing, just so you know, we've talked about this. Our group, our operations group, which is Tommy and me and Dave, this was the first change we had undergone in 5 years. We were a cohesive group, and we're very protective of our group. I'm very protective as the new kind of head of the group. We've never, and this is just a side note for you, we lock ourselves in a room once a month for about 2 hours, and we say what anybody in the room thinks to each other, and we come out and nobody ever says a word. I don't know very many places that happens, but in that room we've never had and this is the truth, you can ask, we've never had a crossword or a disagreement in 5 years. Now, we've had debates, so I'm very protective of that group, and if I thought that changing the group and the structure of who we were, to the members internally or to the group size, or if I thought that was a real issue, I wouldn't, even if we thought this was best, we wouldn't have done it. This group works real hard. Dave, Mr. Breeden, but then also to Tommy and those folks. These projects that you see, lots of times, folks that you don't really know get caught up to do things. Tommy may get sent to meet a person because there's 3 or 4 projects going on. When I was in the transportation role, I stood and watched a parking lot get built because the other guys were so busy they couldn't do that. And so this gives cohesiveness to a team that is doing a lot of work, and it lets that expand, and we're only going to grow greater and bigger as the county expands. So we think this is the best option. We worked hard to find money that was never student-driven money. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is this: we are the beginning and the end of the day. We are who picks you up in the morning, who takes you home at night. We're who makes sure your building's warm when it's cold outside, cool when it's hot outside, that it doesn't smell bad, that when you push the water fountain button that it actually works. And we give the folks in the other side of the house the opportunity to come in and do the work that we all know we're here to do. Our goal is this, for you never to see us. I know we sit in front of you and talk a lot, but in the day-to-day basis, we hope you never think about a bus driver. We hope you never think about maintenance. We hope you never think about construction, because it just happens. And all the people that do technology works, it goes. When it doesn't, it's fixed. And you know, your food's warm, and at the end of the day you went home and you talked about your teachers. You didn't talk about the stuff that we did. That's our goal on our side, and I truly do think that this gives us a better opportunity to serve a district that's growing pretty steadily right now. We added 2 million, I think we added a 20% growth to our square footage. We're over 2 million square feet in our district, and that it costs $1.28 per square foot to do energy for, and that's a lot of work put in by a lot of people. So I'm going to be quiet now and let y'all talk.
Thank you, Mr. Perryman. And this will be on new business at the board meeting. One last thing, and then we'll take a break. No, the break, a permanent one, no. Did you see the look on her face? Oh my gosh, for a week. I want Ms. Morency to give us a update on diploma. They met this afternoon, and then we will break.
We did meet this afternoon and welcomed Chris to our committee. It's technology. We're no longer diploma. We are the technology committee. I'll do this really quickly. We identified 2 priorities. One is we need an inventory of all of the devices that we have, and the way that we suggested doing that is Chris is going to come up with a survey for each principal. So each principal will be surveying their schools and giving those back to Chris, and that will be the inventory. So we decided it'd be both devices and projectors, and what they need for those projectors. The second one was our priority for the devices is to get devices in the hands of all our teachers first. You can't teach unless you have a device to teach with. So they are going to, and that's where this inventory comes in. The older desk models, they told me 40 minutes to boot up, will no longer be in the hands of our teachers. But those are the 2 things that we came up with.
Thank you so much. Oh, and we're adjourned. The look on you.